Oh, hey, dude. Welcome in, everyone. Long time no see. I know the old Frost man has been gone for quite a while, but I return bearing gifts. Long story short, Steelovsky and I, around a month ago, got together to have a little chat. Here's a sneak peek behind the scenes as to how that went down.
What would you do if you had a
podcast, dude?
I'll tell you what I'd do, man. Two
developers
at the same time, man.
So, that's exactly what we did, dude. Fellow content creator Steelovsky and I sat down to have a chat with Saul Gascon, which was the executive producer on Lords of the Fallen 2023, and Thomas Mahler, which is the CEO of Moon Studios, responsible for both the Ori series and No Rest for the Wicked. Both of these developers are gaming industry veterans with over 20 plus years of experience. So please sit back and enjoy while we cover a wide array of different topics with a core focus on PvP in video games.
Hi all, welcome. If you just jumped on the live stream, I gotta have to inform you that today we have a special stream because we are podcasting, and we are podcasting with Thomas from Moon Studios. Hi, Thomas.
Hey, everybody.
And also Saul from, not anymore, Hexworks Studio.
Hello, guys.
Hi, and Thomas and Saul are game developers. They brought us two amazing games, which is Lords of the Fallen from 2023 and No Rest for the Wicked, released initially in early access. Actually, exactly 2 years ago, to the day, isn't it? Yeah, so exactly 2 years ago, No Rest for the Wicked released in the early access. And we brought both Thomas and Saul to hear their opinions about, generally speaking, Souls PvP or Souls-like PvP. Because technically, if you assume that both Lords of the Fallen and No Rest are Souls-likes, then both these games actually have PvP, and this is not really a common occurrence. In vast majority of cases, Souls-likes actually do not have any PvP at all, and developers seems to actually avoid competitive game modes altogether. And so maybe to kind of break the ice, although not really needed, because
I'm here too.
Yeah, and here is actually good reminder. Thank you, Frosty. There is also Frosty, that is a co-host of this entire thing. And generally speaking, Frosty brought up the idea to interview Thomas, and then I brought an idea of bringing Saul also and to the podcast, and then we just have it all, to break the ice, Frosty, I heard you had a certain question to both Thomas and Saul.
Yeah, and before we jump into that, once again, I just want to say congratulations, Thomas, on your 2-year anniversary in early access there. I know you've sold 1.7 million copies of No Rest for the Wicked in early access, which is a monumental success for an early access title. So congratulations on that. And just thank you, the both of you, for taking the time to be a part of this and letting us pick your brains on these topics. So with that being said, the first thing that I would want to gauge your guys' opinion on is, what was each of your first experiences with PvP in a video game, and how does that tend to translate into the games that you make and have worked on in the past?
Saul, do you want to start, or want me to go first?
Yeah, I can break the ice. So for me, my first PvP was Street Fighter 2 in an arcade machine. So basically, there was this place that we were hanging with our friends, and then one day they brought the arcade machine, Street Fighter 2, and we were like, holy moly, what is this? What is this sorcery? Because those graphics back in the day were out of this world. And actually, by playing that, with my friends and with some randoms, like we had there like a costume, like a way in which basically somebody could come and put like a coin on top of the arcade to tell you, hey, I'm gonna challenge you, right? And then you will take the coin, put it in, and then that's kind of a way for to say challenge accepted. And that's how I started with PvP. But not only that, that's when I decided that I wanted to do video games, because I was so let's say impressed by the game and by how all the things that this made me feel, when I was fighting with others, and then how we talked after about strategies and combos and yada yada, that I was like, I want to make people feel like that. I want people to experience this, and that's was my first experience and actually my trigger to work in the game industry.
That's extremely cool to hear, man.
I can't even remember what my first PvP experience was, because like even back in the very early, like when I was like 4, 5, 6 years old, right? Like when we had the first stuff that we ever bought was an Atari and a Commodore 64, right? And there were always games on there that had a 2-player mode, right? Where you could play against one another and so on. And it always, like I grew up with 2 brothers and I had a best friend, right? So that was exactly 4 people. So it was always perfect, right? Like if only one person was around, we would play 2-player PvP stuff, right? And if 4 people were around, we played, 4-player stuff. So if you'd push me, I would say it was probably some game like Ball Blazer or something on Commodore 64, right? Like that kind of thing. Where, and the thing that struck me was always that it's an interesting phenomenon, right? That if you have a game, and a game is basically a system, right? If you play together, it usually automatically is more fun, right? It's one of those things in development where you actually don't have to do that much. It's just the sheer act of playing against another person is enjoyable, right? And
I think there are people that might disagree.
Really?
Why people that hate being invaded in Souls games.
Oh, no, but that's a different thing, right? Like, I think that's a different thing. So being invaded in Souls games is exactly because it's an invasion, right? Because it's, I'm playing this single-player game, and I'm trying to make progress, and suddenly some other bastard comes into my game, right, and tries to screw me over,
ruin your weekend, right?
Exactly. Yeah. So I think that's a different thing, right? But if you think back of like the classics, right, like we even had a PC Engine, right, where we played, what was it called, Family Smash Tennis or something, right? I don't remember anymore, but it was always super fun. Like we grew up playing all these kind of like multiplayer games because, again, like I had brothers, right? And so that multiplayer games were always super addictive and important to us, right? Like all the way back to, games on that platform, or like then on the NES, right? Like we had Nintendo World Cup, which we played against one another, or on the Super Nintendo, right? Like it went on with like Super Mario Kart and those kind of things. Then, like you had all these kind of like split screen things. And it's actually quite like we're in an interesting position now, right? Where local multiplayer kind of like become kind of unpopular these days, right? And I'm a little bit sad about that, because that, like when I grew up, that used to be a big thing in our family, right? That we always played games together. And these days, I have an 8-year-old boy now. Like he mostly plays alone, and I don't love that, right? Because it's just fun to play together.
It is true that I've seen this though, not being fighting game, but actually triggering feelings even stronger than a fighting game, like football simulation games, or hockey, or sports simulation. I've seen a lot of coach play with those at this, in the office or with friends, and I think it triggers similar feelings of like, what did you do this? A lot of let's say tension between players. But I agree, like there's obvious people is more, on their own PC or console and playing online mainly, right?
It's really strange though, right? Because the internet and all of that stuff promised that, hey, we would all be playing together, always super connected, right? And to some degree that has become true. But I also feel like I was more connected a lot of times when I played like couch co-op or like couch PvP and so on than I am today a lot of times. And I think that's mostly because, and that also I think has an effect on how we did No Rest for the Wicked in co-op, right? Because I think there's also an interesting phenomenon going on where defeating someone that is anonymous, right, is much less enticing than playing a game against your brother, right, and seeing how he reacts and that kind of thing, right? So that to me is really interesting. So with Wicked, for example, right, we did the co-op in a way where you actively have to invite the friends that you play with. You're not just playing with complete strangers for many reasons, right? Because Wicked is also built in a way where they could actually screw up your experience, right? Where they could, like, hey, you have to build up a town and that kind of thing, or they could complete quests that you wanted to do with them and so on, right? But yeah, there is something that feels kind of lonely these days playing online games, even though you are playing them basically against the entire world or with the entire world, right?
Yeah. Very, very well said from the both of you guys there, you know. And I think, yeah, largely the entire concept of like the death of like couch co-op and things like that, like you mentioned, you know, towards the start of what you were saying, Thomas, it's like that is a very sad thing that those things are being essentially devalued by a lot of the other, you know, developmental studios out there and things like that, and they're forced to like cut them due to time constraints, or, you know, just the value proposition is not, you know, there for them in particular, you know. So yeah, no, that's very, very interesting. And yeah, so unless there's anything else that you guys wanted to say in relation to that specifically, we'll move on to the next talking point.
Actually, I have a certain question.
Yeah,
you brought that like it is kind of lonely nowadays. I mean, like people playing the game, playing games on their own. What you think about that concept of invasions in Souls games? Then, in general, like it is kind of forced interaction in some to some capacity. Do you think this is actually a good concept in the first place?
Yeah, forced versus opt-in, yeah, in terms of engagement when it comes to PvP, yeah.
Yeah, because like technically you are forcing interaction between players. It is not very often a positive type of interaction, depending on player approach, judging by lots of backlash in the internet related to invasions. It is very often not a positive type of interaction. It is an interaction nonetheless. Like, you know, even negative type of interaction might be actually at the end of the day positive for the general experience, yeah? Because you just remember that asshole that backstabbed you back in 2011 when you played Dark Souls 1 for the first time, yeah? So I kind of wonder, like, out of considering the fact that invasions became kind of a big thing in the Souls-likes generally, or not in the Souls-like, but in the Souls games, yeah? Then I'm actually curious what you think about that. Is that like something positive in that regard then, considering that we actually see growth of single-player approach and invasions basically force interaction between players?
I think if you look at the consensus online, right, I would say it's actually probably around 50-50 or so, right? Where 50% love it, and 50% really despise it and just don't want to get invaded and so on, right? And I think there's a clear analogy there to PvP servers in MMORPGs and that kind of stuff, right? Where where a lot of players just do not like the idea that other players can come in and ruin their day, right? At the same time, like Saul and me, before we had this podcast, right? Like we had a little bit of a chat right now. And we kind of like just figured out that we are just old farts, basically, right? That I'm 42. Yeah, exactly, experienced farts. And if you're that experienced, right, you will have grown up playing games like Ultima Online, right? Where it was really interesting. Like Ultima Online was basically the first proper MMORPG that really became successful, right? And what Ultima Online did was that it just tried to simulate a world, right? Meaning that, hey, if you walk out of the town, somebody could fucking murder you, right? And actually steal all your stuff, which is incredible. Like most developers would not do that today, right? But if you had incredible gear and you would walk with it outside of town, somebody could actually stab you in the back, murder you, and grab your gear, right? And of course, players do not like that, right? Because it's an infuriating moment when something like that happens to you, right? But I would guarantee you, those are the players, right? Like that even 20 years later, when they, reminisce, right? That they will tell you that happened to them, right? That was one of those big moments. And I think the same thing you've seen in Souls games and so on, right? Where it's just, yes, of course, like why would you like an invasion where, you were on your way, you had a good run, you were on your way to the boss, and some other player invades you and just screws you up and kills you, right? And like completely resets your progress and so on. But I think one of the things that From Software did that actually helped the industry, I think, a great deal, right, was to abolish that notion that for a game to be fun, it needs to be frictionless, right? And in many ways, Souls games are the epitome of that, right? Like that it's not that games shouldn't be about, hey, they should be as smooth and like frictionless as possible, right? But that the friction has to be part of it, right? For it to be fun.
Yes.
Exactly. Like this helps tremendously into immersion, right? Because like as Miyazaki-san taught all of us, right? He built these games not about fairness. It's not around fairness. It's about tension. It's around tension. It's about what's gonna be in the next corner. I don't know, right? So there is a trap. There is an enemy. There is a group of whatever that appears, and you go like, "Oh my god, I'm gonna die now," right? So this unpredictability and asymmetry between you, the player, and the game, right? Like that you have absolutely no clue what's gonna happen to you next. You cannot predict it. It's what makes you go like on every step, like go slowly, advances slowly, to kind of not to die, right? Like just to survive. And that's why invasions in this loop work very well, right? Because invasions, then the PvP is built around that same tension and not fairness, right? So it's all about this unpredictability of like, oh my god, I got invaded, what do I do now, right? And then this is when it kicks in, right? With the like all your senses kind of start activating. Okay, now I'm playing not only PvP, and this is also very interesting, I'm also playing against the world. So I'm playing against the world, which I might or might not know what's there, right? If you played the level before or not, you might know if there is enemies in a corner or a trap. But also this player, which I don't know how he's gonna be using the tools that he has, call it weapons, spells, whatever, but also the environment. Is he gonna backstab me in the next corner? Is he gonna transform into a bush? So so I confuse it with the environment, and actually it's the player there. So this is something very interesting, and I think this is why it's so special. And even if indeed you have this, let's say, 50-50 almost of people that loves it and people that hates it, right? It's still, even if you hate it, it still keeps you immersed in the world, right? So that's why I think that it works, and this is why actually we integrated in Lords 23, Lords of the Fallen 2023, because it really helped creating this unpredictability, right? Like okay, yeah, the level, even if you've played it 20 times, still you can get invaded, and then it's not the same at all. You need to, there is new rules there.
This is actually, I think this is, at least for me, the most important thing about Invasions, that it is infinite gameplay loop.
Yes.
From both perspective of invader and someone that gets invaded.
That's the thing, by the way, I do not enjoy about Dark Souls games. Let's actually segue into something else real quick, right? So with Souls games, traditionally what you have is, let's take Dark Souls 1 for a second, right? Like I have Undead Burg, which is an excellently designed level, like just really great level design through and through, right? But the problem that I always had with Souls games is that I love these levels so much, but then they never really give me a good reason to come back to them, right? Or to retraverse. And it is still fun because as you come back through Undead Burg to go to the catacombs or something, right? you still get that feeling of, oh my God, look, that enemy used to be really hard, but now I can kill him in 2 hits, right? So there is still some fun there. But one of the things that we try to solve with Wicked is through our state system, that as you come back through levels, right, that they actually grow with you a little bit, right? Meaning that and that you get unpredictable events. Like, how great would it be if you would play Dark Souls 1 again, right? And as you come back from, like already being further ahead, right? That you come back to Underdark and suddenly, oh my God, there's now like whatever, like 2 fucking big bosses or something spawning in this one area or something, right?
Mhm.
That is interesting. So in one way, they have solved that, right? With like, oh yeah, everywhere you can get invaded, right? But on the other hand, in the PvE aspect, that's where I still feel like it would be cool, like if there would be more reasons to come back to levels, right? Other than just that one reason.
Yeah.
Meaning that normally in Souls, like the enemies will spawn exactly where they spawned before. The chests will already have been opened and so on, right? That's
Yes.
one of the things where I'm like, hey, this is a place where the Souls design could improve.
Well, does that mean that at some point we are going to have both invasions and the system that currently is at hand in No Rest?
We are certainly discussing it, right? And invasions, like basically on our priority list, we just introduced duels, which was basically just done so we kind of like in a sneaky way already get some of the telemetry data from players fighting each other, right? And like how are things holding up and that kind of thing, and like generally just to get a feel for how do people feel about that, right? Before we then actually properly introduce PvP into Wicked. And that's the priority list that you had. Duels was the first strike. The second strike will be us introducing the proper PvP arena, where you can actually challenge other players, play against everybody else in the world, right? And climb the ladder and that kind of thing. And then the third thing would be, okay, like how do we deal with invasions and that kind of thing?
This is
right?
actually
That's
amazing, because like I generally thought that you are going to look for excuse to avoid the topic. Like, I didn't expect that you literally going to say, oh yeah, we are thinking about invasions in No Rest. No, that's amazing. That's like...
No, I think it's an interesting, like it's a very interesting thing that happens on top of your single player experience, right? But obviously, yeah, I mean, we will have to figure out all the same stuff, right? Because like 50% of the player base hates it. So how do you deal with that, right? And some of the ways and how you deal with it in Dark Souls doesn't really work for me, because invasions, like the game is really designed for you to basically play online, right? Like and get these kind of moments. So yeah.
So one thing, Thomas, in relation to that, this was a concept that I was talking with my brother about the other day, and we thought it was a very, very, it's kind of like an epiphany moment. So tell me what the both of you guys saw and you, Thomas, think about this. So it's no surprise that, like we've already discussed, how players' perception of what the invasion system is very, it can be extremely negative, and there's this this notion surrounding it that, oh, this is an extremely toxic experience. The person's gonna point down on my grave after they kill me and throw shit pots on me, right? Like that's the notion from like the Soul series and things like that, right? And I think a lot of that boils down to a lot of players' perception of what an invasion is and why they have a negative response towards it is purely based off of the aspect that invasions have one core success metric, I guess, and that is killing the host of the world that you invaded, right? So what is your guys' potential thoughts on a system that, of course, you make sense in, or sorry, I'm losing my train of thought here. Essentially alternative win conditions. So when an invader invades your world, you don't know what they're there for and what they're there to accomplish, right? So like, for example, in No Rest for the Wicked, you have the resource gathering. This was just something that I, thought of off the top of my head. So like an alternative win condition, aside from killing said host, could be you have to mine one ore node, you have to fish one fishing spot, you have to chop down one tree, and you have to dig one dig spot in their world. And then that is a alternative means of success for that said invader. So, what do you guys think about alternative win conditions supplementary to the baseline goal of what an invader is there to achieve?
That is definitely something that we've thought about, right? Because at Moon usually, and this is an interesting subject that you bring up, because this is typically how we as game developers or game designers basically talk about these subjects. Because you always have to ask yourself, how can I improve upon the systems that are already there, right? And you already figured out, hey, the invasion system isn't really that deep, right? Like all it really does is, hey, spawn another player in that player's world, give him feedback that he has spawned, and then it gets a very simple condition, like either kill player or that's it, right? Like you have to kill the other player. Like the host has to kill the invader, and the invader has to kill the host, and if that's it, then done, right? But if you think further, right, like how would I further improve the system? I think there's a lot of unbelievably interesting things to do. So, for example, right now we're working on factions as well.
Yes.
With the integration of the class system and factions, what that does in Wicked is basically it's the guilds that you see in Elder Scrolls and so on, right? Meaning that hey, if you play an assassin, then what you'd want to see happen is that you can actually live out that class fantasy, right? So you should get some quests that are about doing assassinations, right? And murdering people and that kind of thing, right? So now if you think about invasions that way, right? Where it's like, wouldn't it be interesting if you get sent out as an assassin and now, like the goal is, you start somewhere, like, and you spawn in a different person's world, right? You spawn somewhere and you're like, you get the contract that, oh my God, I have to kill the smithy in the town, right? And what if the other guy gets the whole thing of like, oh shit, somebody got a contract about killing Fillmore, right? So what do I do now to protect Fillmore, right? So I think that's super fascinating, like that whole subject, right? If you'd have that and you properly weave it into the game, right? Like you properly make that work, I think that would be fascinating. That's generally something where, like, as much as I love From Software, right, and love what they've done and how they help the industry, I think they're also slow to innovate right now because if you look at multiplayer and how it's been done in Souls games, right, it hasn't really changed that much since Demon's Souls launched in 2009, which is 17 years ago, right?
You could argue it
so,
regressed.
For example, exactly, to some degree, right? Like you have all these players out there that are saying, like, there's a couple of people in my team that are still whining that PvP Dark Souls 2 was the best, right? That kind of thing. And that it's been made harder to even engage or like to screw with people and so on in Elden Ring, etc. So that kind of like bothers me a little bit, and I'm always wondering kind of like what that is, right? Like maybe it's Miyazaki. Like, I mean, Miyazaki has been working on fucking Souls-likes now for 17 years, right? That's a long time to basically work in one genre, right? Agreed. So I'm actually wondering if it's like him getting a little bit tired of the genre and having to work, like basically do something similar for this long, right? But he has to do it because that's what pays the bills, right? Like Souls games clearly make a lot more money than anything else from Software, right? They just did Armored Core, right? But I don't think they can probably live off of the success that Armored Core had, right? Whereas Elden Ring sold 30 million copies or even more now, right? So yeah.
Well, it's very fascinating too with what you brought up there, because like, looking at the natural progression path and the things that have been changed from iteration to iteration over the past 17 years, like there's been a clear like how would I put this, Steel? They've definitely like leaned back on the elements of like how brutal and or toxic an invasion can be, right?
Yeah.
Because like they've done changes to where the invader only invades with 25% of their health missing, and like basically lowering the invaders down a notch to kind of keep that scale, as balanced as possible, right? And then also moving forward into like what we got with Elden Ring, which I think was just a colossal step back in terms of the multiplayer functionality, all of the implementation of multiplayer-based systems. There's a lot of speculation as to why that all of that stuff, took a back seat this time, largely because of the scale of creating a game the size of what Elden Ring is. But
Maybe worth to mention initially that in Elden Ring, if you guys do not follow Elden Ring multiplayer that much, then it's worth to mention that Elden Ring has been stripped of fundamental things related to multiplayer in other Souls games created by From Software.
Yeah.
So we have no covenants. We have
which is a huge one.
We do not have solo hosting, essentially singular player, unless they agree to it through toggling two different items. They cannot be solo invaded. And generally speaking, in order to even see something like other players' multiplayer signs, that being dwelling signs or co-op signs, you have to agree to see these signs through toggling an item, which ultimately leads to many players not being even aware there is something more than asynchronous aspect of multiplayer, like messages, and so on, because those are the only things that are visible from the get-go. Maybe I'm going to bring anecdote related to Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3. So a lot of, in many cases, Dark Souls 2 and Dark Souls 3 players are being introduced to PvP through the PvP hotspots. In case of Dark Souls 2, there is a location called Ion Bridge, and this is a location that you have to go through if you want to progress through the game. And the moment you step your foot in that location, there is like 30 signs appearing in front of you, 30 different red signs appearing in front of you, and player being like, what the fuck is this? Oh my god, wait, I can summon, who the fuck is that? A duelist? And this is how they are being introduced to the concept of PvP. And this is directly after a boss fight. So player has possibility to engage in the multiplayer directly because like they can refill, they can actually use the human effigy that activates like possibility to see things. Actually, if I recall correctly, you didn't even have to do anything to see these signs like in Dark Souls 2. So like
in DS2, I don't think so.
Yeah. And then in Dark Souls 3, you had exactly same case, but with location called Pontiff Sullivan, like after the name of one of the bosses, where you just kill a boss, you step in the new location, and boom, another 30 signs directly beneath your feet. And, and Elden Ring has nothing like that, because in order to even see signs, in order to be somewhat introduced to that multiplayer, you have to toggle two different items, or like one different item, that some people are not even, they might not even have it technically. So yeah, that's a big issue basically.
And that, like, on top of that too, like when in those PvP hotspot areas, there was always something that the community described as being fight clubs, right? Where you would take, one host would summon 5 different red phantoms, and then they would sit in the middle, and then they would just basically watch all of these other red phantoms and duelists just duel it out. And then, people would try to beat their high score of like, oh yeah, dude, I've been in this fight club for 3 hours, and I've killed 60 people, right? And like that was the natural progression path, and like Steel was saying, that introductory to the multiplayer aspects of the game, and it worked in such a seamless way. And even something as simple as like the dueling hotspots with the red duelist sign, that is something that is baked into the game in such a way that it's essentially an opt-in system, right? But it does it so organically that it's able to introduce these players to these systems through the game with their own volition. You know what I mean?
Yeah, actually, I remember the first time that I saw one of those red signs in Demon Souls. I was like, "Oh, what is this?" Poor me. I didn't know what was it, right? So I was like, "Oh, that's cute." And then I clicked on it. You had this silhouette of a guy. It's like, oh, okay, I guess it's some sort of NPC shenanigan.
Oh no!
And then holy, hey, what? I got attacked. It was super fun, and a bit crazy the first time, and then you get used to it, and then you play with it, right? But yeah, there is a lot of ways. I agree with what you guys are saying, that there is a lot of ways that invasion system or PvP in Souls-likes can be tackled. And at the end, to kind of try to move this balance from 50-50 to more of like a 60-40, then 70-30, you know, start like moving the measurement there, the percentages. You need to give incentives to players, right? Because
Yes.
in general, the PvE player that wants to focus on PvE, either solo or in co-op, solo is easy. You just go offline, you good, right? And then, you know, if you're playing co-op, you want to play with a friend and you just want to focus PvE, there is really no incentive, right? And we tried in Lords 23 to add these incentives, like with different, a bit in the lines of what Thomas was saying before. We added quests that were related to this in both sides of the invader and, let's say, the invaded, right? We added also rewards every time that you fought. Even if you lost, you got something back. So it wasn't just like a, hey, you know, like, sorry, have a bad weekend, bye bye. We try to always, let's say, smoothen a bit that experience, right? But still, you know, the players got into this 50-50. We added items to avoid it for a while. We added items to, we did a lot of things that to try to kind of move that percentage, right? But I think at the end it's about let's say the mindset of the player, right? Like the player is playing the game. What does he want to achieve? Okay, I get him to PvP. Why? Is that am I gonna take something good out of this, or if it's just an extra annoyance, right? For the people that doesn't like it, right? So for the people that likes it, like you know, I think probably this call it's we're 50-50ish, or maybe three we like it, one, you know, Thomas, you seem you don't like it that much, right? The invasions I'm talking about.
No, I'm actually a big
you know,
fan. I'm just wondering. I'm just wondering about how could it be done in a way where even the kind of like the players who just usually engage with single player really want to engage with it, right? Because that's like the Souls games have always been a little bit fuzzy about this stuff, right? Like you don't get explained like exactly like you said, Saul, right? Like you don't get an explanation exactly like of what invasions are and how they work and that kind of thing. And again, like I see a very similar thing to how MMORPGs and that kind of thing has evolved, right? Because today nobody would be crazy enough to ship as like the main way to play one of those games, right? That hey, you're just on a PvP realm, right? So now you are playing in the newbie zone in the starting area, and by the way, there's all these level 60 guys already that fucking murder and gank all the noobs, right? Like nobody would do that today anymore, right? But that was done in the past. And I think with the Souls games specifically, what we have seen is that over the years, they've softened them up more and more and more and more, right? To the point where I think Elden Ring clearly is the easiest Souls game I've ever played, right? Like just hands down, like just super streamlined, right? And even the level design and all of that stuff, right? Like it's been made open world, right? It's definitely been made a lot more commercial friendly, right? Whereas the experiences that you guys brought up are kind of like a little bit obscure and that kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
and
super niche. Right?
Yeah, super niche, right? And like fairly obscure, but like it brought in experiences that, you know, people still really fondly remember, right? So there is definitely some value there, but I would actually want to, like in this discussion, let me be the person who plays devil's advocate, right? Because you also can't miss that, well, Elden Ring was the first Souls game that really broke out like crazy, right? That sold 30 plus million copies, that became an unbelievable smash success, right? Usually with Souls games, they sold like what, 2 to 5 million copies, right? Meaning that they were really big successes, but not like, oh my God, like this is as big as Call of Duty or something, right? So you know, how do we resolve that issue, right? Because it's like, okay, well, the way Miyazaki and his From Software team achieved tremendous success, apparently, right? You could make the argument that it was by streamlining everything and like softening all these moments and like, removing that tension and that kind of thing, right? And kind of like bringing it more in line with what other games have done, where it doesn't feel that bad if you die, and those kind of things. So I'm a little bit puzzled about that, right? At the same time, I mean, I'm always a very kind of like hardcore designer, right? Like if you'd like, I enjoy playing Wicked in hardcore mode. I enjoy playing really hard fucking games, right? I was the guy in the arcades who was able to finish Metal Slug with 1 credit, right? Like with 1 coin, and that's it.
Nice.
And at the same time, we do also have to keep success in mind, right? Because like, yes, there are a lot of people who do not like invasions and do not like that stuff. And now in Elden Ring, it's kind of like been almost taken out, right? And so, what does that tell us?
Right. Yeah. And it's a tough thing, right? Because who's to say what the metric would have been as to the
Yes.
level of success that Elden Ring would have, the amount of copies that it would have sold if a solo host invasion system was in the game. Because like, for example, I remember talking way back in the day when like Dark Souls 1 was really popping off, and in my friend group and stuff like that, a lot of people they were kind of standoffish towards it. They're like, oh, isn't that brutally hard game, and stuff. And I was like, just give it a shot, right? And a lot of those people, they ended up going through the game. They liked the foundation, things like that, the combat system. They thought it was very cool, right? And ultimately, a lot of them, and I'm sure a lot of people just in general, like average gamers that have tried out, one of the Dark Souls games that has solo host invasions. I just remember one of my buddies telling me at the time, he was like, I was really enjoying the game, and then I got invaded, and I got one-shotted, and then I put down the game forever. And I've heard that sentiment time and time again. But this is a perfect opportunity to also talk about the flip side of that, right? Because both Seal and I, like I remember back in the day when I first got invaded in Demon Souls, kind of similar to what Saul was talking about earlier, and I will never forget that moment, because it was, I got invaded by somebody with the scraping spear, which was a spear that degraded your your items when you got hit by it. Yeah, right. So it would break your equipment, and luckily the guy just backstabbed me and one-shotted me, right? So I don't have to deal with that element of it. But I just remember, like, when I got backstabbed and killed, I had the biggest shit-eating grin on my face, dude. I was like, was that a real player, dude? Like, I want to do that. How do I do that right now? Let me at him, dude. You know what I mean? Like, but for every experience like mine, I would imagine it's 9-1 in the inverse. You know what I mean? Like, of people that experience that, and then they're just like, fuck this is bullshit. I hate this game. What were they thinking? Right?
Yeah,
So
a lot of people
like,
have
how
that
do you balance
angry
that?
approach. Yeah, that something doesn't go my way, then I'm getting upset. Yeah.
Right, but then this leads back into the overall like idea of friction in video gaming, and this comes back to where the industry at large was going towards the latter half of the early 2000s. Where a lot of games were just made to minimize friction as much as humanly possible, right? And you saw this in a wide array of different genres. And I think Demon Souls, and to a larger degree, Dark Souls 1, hitting at the time that it did, when the industry had this kind of, approach towards minimizing that friction as much as possible, Dark Souls and Demon Souls actually brought back that level of friction to the foundational aspect of what existed with the dawn of video games, And I think that that's a very, very interesting thing. Go on, Thomas. Yep.
Exactly right. I always bring up the Prince of Persia 2008 moment, right? Where they released the Prince of Persia, where it was like, oh, if you fall, like you couldn't die anymore, right? Like, oh, if you fall down a cliff, don't worry about it. There's a girl who picks you up and puts you right back where and it was just, dude, like the whole game, like the levels are designed so that you learn, oh, here I have to do a jump, followed by a double jump, followed by a wall climb, right? Like a wall run. And then I have to jump over, right? And now they kind of like took out the thing where it's like, okay, wait, like I don't even have to do the full sequence anymore because you're just spawning me right there again, right? And there's zero friction, right? And it really degraded the game in many ways, right? Because even the learning experience was was taken into the shitter because of that. So I think that's definitely where the Souls games and their success helped, and the critical success, right? At the same time, like as a developer, like as I heard you guys talking, right, there are lots of tricks that you can do, right? So for example, you could already like there's a lot of these meta systems that have been introduced in a lot of these kind of like multiplayer games, right? Like in a lot of these kind of like FPS games, for example, right? There's always the whole, I'm basically getting rewarded for every match. Just I'm already basically getting the participation reward, right? Because in every match, well, I'll at least do something that will progress me a little bit, right? Like
Right, you have the XP bars that going on.
Reward.
Yeah,
exactly. The XP bar will go up a little bit anyway, right? So let's say there's a milestone for me, right? Like, I have to finish this thing in my meta progression, right? And if I play really badly, it takes me 15 matches, right? But I will make some progress always, right? Whereas if I play really well, maybe I only need 5 or 6 or so, right? So I think that kind of stuff helps if you do it, right? But at the same time, like I am a little bit conflicted about this whole thing of like, because I always shot back when people brought up or had this erroneous notion of for a game to really be successful, there shouldn't be any friction, right? Because I was working at Blizzard Entertainment in 2008, 9 something, right? When that notion was really there, and at Blizzard we always shot back with that is such fucking bullshit. Like you look at all these games that are out there, right, that are really successful, they've never really been games that are just super easy, streamlined garbage, right? Like that's certainly been the case on mobile, right? Like there's been a lot of these games where it's like there's zero friction and they're just basically robbing your pocket, right? But like you look at let's say League of Legends or something, right? That game was never fucking easy, right? Like it's not easy to learn. It's super hard to master. You need to know every fucking hero, right? That kind of thing. And that was one of the most popular games out there, right? And it's just, if you want to become extremely good at that game, you really have to put in potentially thousands of hours, right?
Thousands of hours while you're being yelled at in the chat because you suck.
Very important point to bring up.
By the way, I wanted to mention something because my initial PvP experience in Souls games were actually really good. I was always extremely surprised by when I was invaded, right? That you had people come up to me and like bow before they actually try to kill you and that kind of thing, right? And that was so cool that there was an element of like manners, right? Like, you don't just run in and kill somebody, right? But you introduce yourself, you take a bow, right? And that kind of thing. I always loved that, right? That there was some form of communication or some form of like, we're not just barbarians, right? Like we actually
there's like a knighthood there, right? Yes, and I think that going into this, actually, it is very interesting as well. If you guys have played Arc Raiders, right? Like
excellent point. I was going to bring this up or a little bit later too. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, like the inclusion of the voice chat, like being able to talk, right? Changes a lot the way that you approach PvP, right? It's not invasions, but at the end, you're trying to get your whatever resource, and then this guy comes in like, oh, and then from the classic don't shoot to the more elaborate conversations and even teaming up, right? And this is something that actually in this innovation that we were talking about, right? How to reach innovation. This is probably one of my moments recently while playing a game and saying, holy moly, hey, this works, like just the fact that the two players can talk and they can create a relationship beyond like avatars trying to kill each other. It creates this whole narrative, right, that you can generate with this guy. And I've made friends through this, and actually I help people out. Oh, please don't kill me. I'm trying to do this quest. Like, I remember that quest. It's horrible. Yeah, okay, let's go together. Use a reviver, like, perp, and help the guy. So there is ways that you can make even the whole experience of invasions or forced PvP or unwilling PvP to actually
I love that you
hit
bring
other
this.
heights.
I love that you brought this up, Saul, right? Because the first time I actually saw something like that, where it struck me like that, was when DayZ became popular, right? Because for the first time, you suddenly had these moments where one player would engage the other, right? And like that player probably already found a gun and some good stuff, right? And that other player was only playing for like 30, 40 minutes, right? And was like, there was literally like a video, right? Of like, that became viral at that point, right? Where it was like, hey, a well-mannered gangster kind of like thing, right? Where the guy approached him, right? Held his gun at him and was like, "Oh, dude, like I got you, don't move," right? That kind of thing. And it was like a super fascinating conversation, right? Where it's like, "Oh, I haven't really found anything. Here's some ammo, right? Would you please not kill me?"
Yeah,
right?
proximity
And
chat is amazing.
Exactly, like super fascinating discussion, right? And so to me, like if we do invasions, I would probably like try to find a way to be as hardcore as that, right? Because in an extraction shooter, the good thing that you have is that it's just session based, right? Like it doesn't really fucking matter because like every session I get all the loot and all the stuff, right? Like you're not working towards a weapon for like 30 hours, right? And you're like, oh my God, now I have a blood-rusted sword at level 16, fully upgraded with all the enchantments, right? Because if I take that away from you, that's a huge, like, what the fuck? That person took my main weapon that I work towards. I don't even have another one that I could use right now, right? Like the whole game is ruined for me, right? But at the same time, same as the Ultima Online example that I gave, right? That is an amazing thing to happen, right? Because suddenly, like, normally in games, when you die, no big deal. You just start again, you reset, right? There's nothing really to lose and so on. And even the Mario games did this thing where lives don't exist anymore, right? So there's not the fear anymore of, oh my God, if I die, I could really lose something, right? But that is really interesting. The whole, like, what can I actually take away from you, right? Like, that's the thing that designers think about. Like, how can I hurt you a little bit, right? How can I make you fear for something that is about to happen, right? And if you do bring in those elements, then you will have those interesting moments happen where it's like, okay, I engage you, right? And I see, shit, you're 15 levels above me. You could probably beat me, right? And we could do a mano fight here, right? But maybe I want to resolve this in a different way, right? That kind of thing. Or maybe you are just an invader who's like, okay, well, look, I'm 15 levels above you, right? Better make it worth my time, right? Like that they would give you some money or something, right? And you wouldn't have to get into the fight. There's something really fascinating about bringing that kind of stuff in and having those experiences in games, right? And the question is like, how could you do it in a Souls in a Souls game?
I actually have such a great thing to say right now, because you say Saul mentioned proximity chat. You brought more to the discussion about proximity chat, and now you guys are most definitely aware of seamless co-op mod, yeah, in Elden Ring. I mean, like, Saul literally based his Lords of the Fallen like multiplayer experience on the seamless co-op mod. So, like, seamless. So, for people that somehow do not know what seamless co-op mod in Elden Ring is, it is a mod created by a person called Yui, and Yui made it so that you can beat entire Elden Ring together with your friend, or even up to 5 different friends. Without requiring to put down the sign down over and over after every boss. Basically, you never was getting booted out of the world of the host. Instead, every single character in the session was getting synchronized in the progress of the game. And so this mod introduced PvP a while ago, to be exact, invasions. So we have possibility to invade in seamless co-op, and vast majority of hardcore PvP player base actually moved to seamless co-op from the vanilla game, because it is overall much better experience for various different reasons. But what I want to say is, in the next seamless co-op update, Yui is introducing proximity chat. So you are going to have exactly that. You will be able to invade another player and they can talk to you and you talk to them. And I am super stoked for that because it is probably going to be such a funny experience, dude.
Yeah,
I
you
wanna.
know, go on, Saul. Yeah.
No, I just wanna say one thing that that in fact we collaborated with Yui for the seamless co-op, and I just now you mentioned, and I just want to say again thank you because it's an amazing person, like super talented, and it was an absolute pleasure collaborating. So I just you mentioned, so I had to.
Okay.
No,
That's
that's awesome.
that's cool to hear that you had their contribution to Lords too. That's amazing.
So the main thing with all of this, right? Like everything that we've been, all of these talking points, I think they all stack up to an overall idea, and that being things like proximity voice chat and all of that. They go towards a goal of what we talked about earlier, with like alternative win conditions, but like in an organic way, right? Because it's like when both players have the opportunity of communicating with each other in that way, just like you talked about, Thomas, with like, somebody bows when they invade you, before they, initiate the duel or whatever. And even going back to that, there's other players that make it their entire goal to invade people and then drop them gear and items and stuff to help them along their journey, right? And if you actually have these elements that allow you to more comfortably express all of those different forms of approach, like that is exceptional, dude. And it can completely change the entire player perception surrounding what a invasion encounter is, what a PvP based encounter is, all of the above, And I think another thing supplementary to this talking point is you look at what From Software is doing right now by making a game like Dustbloods. It is a PvPvE game, right? And I imagine we know very little about the game right now, but one of the key things that Miyazaki has talked about in one of his interviews in relation to Dustbloods is he's designing a contract system effectively that you will be able to choose a goal that you need to pursue on any given run, which will then completely change the goal of each run that you decide to take on. And I think from that perspective, where it's like, I'll give an example just to nail the point home. The One of the examples that he gave was, oh, say you choose a contract, before going in a game where your goal is to befriend one of the 8 people that you're playing with during a session and then go and defeat a boss. And that is your win condition during this run. And then there's a bunch of other organic based like events that can happen to completely flip the dynamic on its head. And it's not just winner, winner, chicken dinner, and I am the last one standing. I won this match, right? So this element, I think, is integral towards getting a larger audience introduced and more so interested in the whole idea of player versus player, And I really think that it is a perception-based issue for the most part, and a lot of that lies within the mechanical implementation of a lot of these things and how they come together. But
let me say something from a developer's perspective. So a lot of times what clever developers do, right, is that they basically sell you the prototype, right? And what I mean by that is you look at what Naughty Dog did, right? Where it's like, hey, shit, we now have we just completed Last of Us 1, right? And the PlayStation 4 is out. Oh shit, now we have to kind of like update our engine to work on the PlayStation 4, let's say, right? And in order to do that, like we should do that on the Last of Us engine, right? And like just upgrade all of that, right? And in order to do that, while we have Last of Us, let's just make it run on the PS4, right? And then what that became is, oh, here's the Last of Us remaster or something on PS4, right? And they just sell it to you, right? So as a way to kind of like make players buy or pay for the development time of the 1 or 2 years or so that it took to upgrade the engine to another platform, right? So that's a pretty smart thing to do. And so what I'm hoping is that if Miyazaki does this thing with Duskbloods, right, that he's seeing that as a prototype for whatever next big thing he will do in like another Elden Ring-esque scale game,
Agreed.
right? Because Duskbloods is clearly like, hey, here's a probably Nintendo-funded game, right? It's probably not going to be, clearly, like, it's not, like, I think that's already certain, right? Like, it's not going to be on the scale of an Elden Ring, right? It's not going to be a game that sells like 30 million copies or something, right? Or has costs, whatever, $200 million to make.
Of course.
But what he could do is do all the crazy innovative shit there, right? And just see what works, what doesn't. And I think some of that might have already happened, right? Like there was just Elden Ring Night Rain, where they did some really interesting stuff in terms of multiplayer, right? And you can be sure that, well, a lot of that, you know, knowledge and experience will probably go into, okay, how can we improve the multiplayer for, you know, for the next Souls games, right? So I was critical before and said, well, I don't like that the multiplayer aspects in the Souls games have basically been either the same or have become worse in each subsequent game, right? If I compare Dark Souls 1 multiplayer to Elden Ring multiplayer, I much preferred Dark Souls 1 multiplayer, right? Like the PvP stuff and so on.
I mean, I think you're right.
So
like, there's a clear evolution, right?
Just real quick, like that could be interesting, right? Like if they do that, right? But if the next Elden Ring kind of thing as game comes out, right, and it doesn't have any of that stuff, then I would be disappointed. So I'm hoping what they'll do is, you know, like try all this crazy stuff, learn a lot, and then, you know, innovate like crazy, right, with the next title.
Yeah. Yep.
Saul, sorry I cut you off before.
No, don't worry. So no, I think that I mean, you clearly see a strategy there, right? With Night Rain being like kind of a test ground on, okay, let's try to do something different, and with the same base of Elden Ring, but a completely different experience overall, right? And Duskbloods, we know few about it, or few that we can say, but basically it looks like another step, right? More testing, right? And what is really exciting is to see like, okay, but what comes after this, right? So how this knowledge from Night Rain and Duskbloods is going to affect the next big one, right? Elden Ring or 2 or whatever. I'm just making it up. I don't know if there's going to be an Elden Ring 2, but you know, like what is going to be their big next piece, you know?
Well, Elden Ring sold 30 million copies. You can bet your ass that there's going to be Elden Ring 2.
Yeah. But yeah, no, like you guys, it's very cool to, you know, because like that's what you guys were just talking about and breaking down there. That's, you know, like how my brain processed it as well. You know, it's like, what are two of the biggest things that people complain about, you know, when engaging with a From Software game? It is the netcode and shit, I forget the other point right now, but we'll just focus on the netcode for now. Like, From Software, I think, is very aware, painfully so, that their multiplayer and netcode therein needs a lot of improvement. And if you're, you know, like reading the tea leaves, so to speak, right? Like From Software has been hiring in network, you know, based positions over the past 6 years, you know, and they've since filled all of those positions at their company. And it's like their most recent 2 titles are multiplayer centric experience to the same degree as what you guys are describing there. And it's like, I think they recognize that, especially with Elden Ring, they were forced to prune a lot of those multiplayer based systems because whatever the reason was, due to the scale, size of the game, whatever it may be, like they are realizing that and they're like, okay, yeah, let's really focus on this, make 2 smaller titles, and then yes, combine all of that know-how into the next experience. And I think it just makes so much sense there. And that's kind of what they did with it's iterative design philosophy, right? Where you're just from game to game, you're using basically the next game as a trial for a particular system to then put into the next larger project. And we saw that with Sekiro, even trialing jumping, and things like that, right? And like
You saw
mounted
the
enemies.
same thing with the Ori games that I made, right? Like in
Exactly.
Ori, we had the Wellspring Glades, which is basically my prototype for Sacrament, right? For a town that you build over time and so on, right? So it's the exact same thing. So I'm hoping that's going to be the case, right? Because one of the things that I don't love about the industry right now is that everything seems fairly stagnant, right? Like you have all these games, like especially the AAA space is in a pretty shitty spot. It's in the worst spot that I've seen in a long time, right? Like AAA, even like in the 2000s and 2010s, even still, right? It was still the thing that pushed innovation, right? Like, and a AAA game was Halo, right? And it really changed how first-person shooters should play on a console, right? And since then, we've seen just, oh my God, all these AAA games are just warmed up soup from yesterday, right? Like it's literally the same thing. It even regresses, right? Then you had Halo coming out. Oh my God, it doesn't even have split screen anymore. Oh my God, the gunplay has become worse, right? And like over time, gamers were just giving them the middle finger, right? Because they were just like, I'm not having that much fun anymore, and you guys are not really pushing the genre or the limits anymore, right? So that sucks. So what I want to see is them doing exactly that, right? Like them doing like, yeah, we're doing some insanely innovative, crazy stuff, right? But it's going to take some time. I hope that happens. I hope we don't see more kind of like regressions or, hey, the multiplayer, like if the multiplayer is the same thing again in the next Souls game that it was in Elden Ring, I think people would lose their shit. I think people would go, yeah, this is not good enough. Fuck that, right? Like you guys, like this, everybody can see how you could do it better, right? And at the same time, at Moon, many times what I'm trying to accomplish is that and this might sound a little bit asshole-ish, right? But like I'll just say it, right? But I'm trying to make other people innovate, right? So one of the reasons why I started with No Rest for the Wicked is because I was just frustrated with how little innovation we've seen in the ARPG genre and how that has kind of like stagnated, right? Like where you had Diablo 2 come out, and then for years, every other ARPG that came out was basically a carbon copy of Diablo 2, right? And then you had Diablo 3 come out, and Diablo 3 to me was a clear regression of, what Diablo 2 was. Like it wasn't on that level in terms of quality, in terms of like the design of it. And so I got frustrated, and we clearly saw what happened in the Eastern industry, meaning Japanese designers, right? Where Capcom with the Monster Hunter series already created a combat system that was far more intricate than anything that the Western ARPG designers had ever done, right? And so same thing happened with the Souls series. The Souls series basically looked at Monster Hunter and was like, okay, well, let's create an adventure around that, right? Like let's create an RPG that uses that kind of like animation commit combat, right? And so we did the same because it just seemed like that is such a dramatically better system than the old point and click stuff, right? Like I couldn't imagine playing a Souls game in the way I play Diablo, where I click at a position and then my character walks up to it and then does the attack, right? That just seems, by now, that just seems antiquated and like not the thing that you should do anymore, right? Like I'd want direct control over my character, which opens up so many cool things, right? Like, so for example, right, I was there when Diablo 3 was in development at Blizzard, right? And there was a time where you could play Diablo 3 PvP at BlizzCon. And it kind of sucked, right? Like it was okay when you picked the character, right? And it was just, we as developers have kind of like balanced these characters against one another, and it kind of works. It wasn't that much fun because the combat system really doesn't have that much depth, right? But it kind of works at least balance-wise, right? But then when you actually use characters like that normal players made, right? It was just a complete shit show, right? It was just, I'm just one-shotting, like I'm joining your game, I'm one-shotting you, and the game is over, right? And so that leads us actually nicely to the PvP discussion, right? Meaning that what bothers me right now, like I would actually like to hear from Frosty, Saul, and Steel real quick, right? Because we are sitting there and like thinking about what should the PvP experience be. And to me, if I break it down design wise, is that what we have there with Souls-like games and these combat systems is we basically have a 3D fighting game.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Tekken or Virtua Fighter, because to me, I do not understand why we call that 3D fighting games, because the actual gameplay is not 3D, right? It's literally just, it's the same 2D fighting game, but you have polygonal characters, right? For the most part. So this is the way I've been approaching it, right? That I would want to see a completely like the game basically embracing that, right? Like we are clearly a fighting game and we have full 3D movement. So in many ways, a Souls-like is basically in many ways kind of like the successor to something like Power Stone, right? To Capcom's Power Stone from the whatever, late 90s, early 2000s, right? Because it is a 3D fighting game. And now the question becomes, how can we make 3D fighting games A, fucking excellent, and B, even better than what 2D fighting games have done before, right? Yeah, I would just love to hear, like, what would be the ideal arena PvP experience be in a Souls-like game? How do you guys feel about it?
I have a lot to say on this, so I'll let you two guys go first.
I would love to hear what Saul has to say, especially from the perspective of developer.
Yeah. Okay.
Especially because I personally don't have much to say, honestly.
Okay.
I mean, to be honest, it depends on what you're trying to achieve with the overall experience of your game, right? So is it about, as we were saying before, right? Building this tension, not fairness? Is it about more interactions with environment? Is it about supporting the builds and play styles from different players, right? Through the RPG layers? Is it to create memorable encounters, as you guys were mentioning before, right? Like these moments that you don't forget. So at the end, it's like,
no,
what
but
are you trying to do, right?
I meant the actual, like, an arena experience, right? Where I'm literally like going into a place where I fight another character, right? That's what I meant. Not invasions or anything anymore, just literally like how can we improve upon what, for example, the Souls games did, right? Like once you actually fight against another player, how do you improve upon that?
So, I mean, to be honest, the current setup, right? Let's assume that, let's say the canon from software, right, which is like player versus player, 1v1 or XBX, includes the environment, includes the enemies around it, right? So then at the end, it depends a lot on the type of game that you're trying to build, right? So for me, it's a very open question. So if you ask me, like, okay, let's grab Lords 23 or Dark Souls 3 or Elden Ring, what would you do to improve the combat there, right? So it is a hard question because it's first, for me, there is a initial question that is harder to answer, which is, why will somebody want to engage in PvP? And that's, I think, the first answer or question to answer, right? Is like, why do I want to take part of this? Like I'm, immersed in this world. I'm talking with NPCs, going through, the dangers of these, places with these bosses, etc. So why do I want to engage with PvP? How can you trigger that interest, right? Because at the end, that might lead you to how to do it. You see? So it depends a lot on how you approach designing on any system, right? But in general, in this very particular case, and it's a very hard question, Thomas, is I will take it from this angle. It's like, how can we motivate people to participate in this PvP?
Let me throw some ideas out. So let me throw some ideas out, right? In terms of like how I'm approaching it design wise. So because what I want to have is like, okay, let's actually have the fucking discussion, right? Like, let's actually discuss this the way we would in our design things, and let's see what happens. So the way I'm approaching it is that first thing that we did was duels, right? Just allow players to duel each other and let's see what happens, right? Second thing that we're doing is arena, right? Like let players actually enter an arena and let's let them fight it out, right? And here we're dealing with, okay, it's a fucking 3D fighting game now, right? Like I'm literally like, it's basically like a fighting game, like Street Fighter or something, right? And we're picking, here's the character that started the whole thing, right? And here's the other guy that I'm the opponent, and he's the opponent. And what do we do now, right? Like, how can we make the fight as interesting as possible? And to me, one of the things that never really materialized, if you look at fighting games in general, right, is that most 2D fighting games, and even things like Street Fighter 4, 5, 6, and so on, happen on a 2D plane, right? I think all of us grew up watching probably Jackie Chan films and that kind of thing, right? And Bruce Lee and so on, right? That kind of stuff. And that kind of fighting never really materialized, right? Like even if you look at Street Fighter, even if you look at high-level Street Fighter play, it doesn't feel like that, right? And I think mostly it is because the environment doesn't matter and all the core gameplay happens on a 2D plane. So there isn't really that much depth that you have there, right? What I think would be really interesting is that if you just look at it from that angle, right, suddenly a lot of things open up, right? Like, okay, let's embrace that we have a 3D environment, right, with full 3D movement and so on. And let's embrace that we have an arena that is not on a 2D plane. Can we make the arena interactive? Can we take some influences from things like Bomberman, right? And so on, where the arena actually, like how the arena is laid out and positioned and so on, changes how I fight. Can we take things from Power Stone or those kind of things, right? I would love like to have experiences where it's not like where it distinctly does not feel like another 2D fighting game, but where it's literally like, oh my God, here's an arena where it's almost doing the Karate Kid 2 thing, right? Of like, oh my God, I'm fighting on a small-ish circle, right? And then around it, like it's surrounded by fucking water with sharks in it or something, right? Where it's like, if I fall down there, I'm dead, right? So great, that's Arena A,
that's
right?
something,
Like,
Thomas, that in Lords 23, that was one of our main directions, right? That's why the arenas, the arenas where basically the invasions can happen not anywhere, right? They can, like for instance, in Souls or in From Software, they can happen almost everywhere, right? But in Lords, what we did is a selection of places. Like here is a good space for an arena. Why? Because we added this 3D element. Exactly what you're mentioning. So we added opportunities for, the first surprise, sure, but then to modify the combat. Like sometimes we place arenas in places with very narrow edges. So it's like suddenly it's completely different approach. Now your tactics that you've learned to, let's say, run to the guy, drop your big spell, and then do some crazy, circular hammer hits. It doesn't work now. It's very easy to fall off. So, So on every arena, you had a bit of a different challenge, right? And of course, we also offered arenas that were more flat, just classic ones, like for fight clubs and people that just wanted a fair 1v1. Let's check our skills and dexterity moments, right? But it's something that we explored a lot in Lords 23.
Paul, did you guys also, like, because I didn't play Lords of the Fallen PvP, did you guys also have interactive arenas, meaning, oh my God, I could activate traps or like pull a lever and then that opens up this this trap door or something, that kind of thing?
Yes, with destructibles, basically. So there was some how do you explain it, like wood planks, basically, that you could destroy to make somebody fall. But it is true though that once players recognize these moments, they just avoid them. You know what I mean? Like they are like the first time, oh, gotcha. But then the subsequent playthroughs, it's a bit harder unless you will build a more of a dynamic environment in which you can burn the grass. You see what I mean? Like, and suddenly create bigger areas of denial, or you push it further with, something related to elements that you can change more dynamically instead of like preset, like planks that break or a lever that you pull down and then something opens.
So this is something I have a lot to say on. Okay, so like
I
I'll
think
start.
actually
go on.
I'm gonna quickly, because you're probably gonna speak for much longer than me.
Yeah.
But so I'm just gonna like jump in and to answer your initial question. Yeah, you say, Thomas, to imagine basically a kind of 1v1 environment similar to the fighting games, and you then mentioned like 3D elements, how you can incorporate these 3D elements into like fighting environment to make it more interesting. And this is actually for me what are essentially invasions. Like why, for example, like at times I am not dueling but rather invading, and other times why I'm dueling and not invading. It's because in invasions you have this element of environment that you can utilize to your advantage. It's not only about putting yourself against the odds, against multiple players against you, and so on and so forth, but also about the fact that you have these Elden Ring maps with various different obstacles that you can utilize to your advantage. You can drop someone off the ledge. You can utilize the mobs in the area to lure them onto the host and his team, and yada yada, this type of stuff. That being said, you ask ultimately about what to do to actually make a 1v1 scenario in that 3D fighting game that essentially is a Dark Souls-like clone, or like Dark Souls game, to be like interesting for players. And frankly, I cannot speak for anyone, like besides my own experience from someone that is kind of, deep into the PvP Souls culture, For me, PvP in Elden Ring, fundamentally, from the perspective of mechanics, is nearly perfect for 1v1. What is the problem is a balance. Because Elden Ring has cool factor, which in my book is the most important. You need to have cool things happening on the screen in order so player be like, wow, this is so cool, I want to try it too. So there is a lot of cool factor in case of Elden Ring. You have like various different tools that have various different movesets, and they are like very interesting. And even for someone that is not very deep into PvP, Ashes of War, which is like system like that, very often is just about you click one button and then all these cool visual effects happens and you hit another player for a lot of damage. Yeah, this is also somewhat of engaging factor. So Elden Ring, from my perspective, with all its additions to the Souls formula, which are crouches and crouch attacks, jumps and jumps attacks, is nearly perfect. What Elden Ring fails in is balance issues, because what is Souls fundamentally in duels, what is exactly all about? You can say it is fundamentally about timing and spacing. Spacing is something that we very well know from the fighting games. So it is about like attempting your opponent to hit them when they are in the recovery frames. Yeah, they are going to whiff their attack. You are actually creating space between you and your opponent in order to punish that when they are in the recovery frames. And that's a huge problem of Elden Ring, because in Elden Ring, recovery frames are super short. And basically, people very often, especially when there is latency involved, can just throw out random attacks and never be punished for it. Timing is another thing, that actually is somewhat fine in Elden Ring. But what Elden Ring introduced with that jumps and crouches is an ability to skip so-called neutral, So right now, it's in previous Souls games, you were just running around like a moron, just waiting for another player to attack in order to whiff punish them. And that was the name of the game. Whoever was more patient usually was about to win the duel. And with introduction of the jumps and crouches, you can blend your attacks, you can jump in and skip neutral altogether, which allows you to just engage in combat more aggressively, and therefore I think Elden Ring formula is nearly perfect for the 3D fighting game. What we need is actually someone that can look at numbers of these games and just adjust them correctly so they are not fucking dog shit, so you don't have weapons that literally have no recoveries and also deal like bazillion damage while being fucking lightweight.
Yes.
That's basically how I see it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
I
you
mean,
hit on
this is a very
Go on.
difficult problem to solve, though, right? And I mean,
is.
we will also have that problem in the Rest of the Wicked to some degree, right? Simply because, and probably even to a bigger degree, because in the Rest of the Wicked, we are also merging in a bunch of the stuff from Diablo, right? Like in Elden Ring, the weapon that you'll get is always the same as any other player gets it, right? Like, hey, if you get that particular sword, it always has these stats, right? And it can't be changed. It is what it is. Like, you can upgrade it, that kind of thing, right? But it will not differ, right? Like, if you have that weapon at level 12, that's the same weapon that the other player has at level 12. We have enchantments on top. We have random stats in there and so on, right?
Yep.
And so essentially what you are creating, right? Like Capcom spends a shit ton of time on creating fighting games with like what 20 characters maybe, right? 25. And here, if you have dynamic stats or like RPG stats, right? Like Elden Ring has how many weapons? Like probably around 200 or something,
Over
right?
300.
More,
yeah.
close to
Okay,
I think
so
300.
over
400
300
now with the DLC.
So
yeah.
Exactly. So basically, that means you are essentially creating a fighting game, not with the just 20 or so characters that you see in a Street Fighter, right?
Right.
But with 300, right? And now
Yes.
add ARPG stats on top of that, right? And it becomes, okay, there's many, millions of permutations that could happen, right?
Absolutely.
And now you need to balance that. And I don't know what exactly the way to solve that is. I mean, we are doing some clever things, right? Like we are using AI for some of this stuff to kind of like really look at, hey, where is a potential? Because this, like, you're dealing with spreadsheets at this point with like
Yeah, of course.
tens of thousands of entries, right? And you're like, okay, well, in the olden days, somebody would have to have gone through this manually, right? And I am the person at Moon who still goes through that manually. I wrote myself an editor that shows me exactly, hey, here's this weapon, right? Here's literally every single thing that this weapon does, and here's the damage multipliers on it and all of that stuff, right? But it is a massive amount of data, right? And then factoring in that also, oh my God, I can have extra enchantments on these weapons, right?
Yeah,
That still
like,
make a
and
difference,
Thomas,
right? It's
even
almost
if
impossible to solve.
and even if you reach that balance, or you think you reach that balance, then you have a Frosty or a Steelovsky breaking it. You saw?
Yes. For sure. I mean, that's the thing I learned from Rapardo at Blizzard, right? Like, they went through StarCraft, right, and the StarCraft balance, and a lot of people felt like, oh my God, StarCraft is almost perfectly balanced. There's an entire esports thing around it, right? And it isn't. It clearly is not, right? And then we went through the same. Like, I was working on StarCraft 2. It went through the same thing, right? Like, in many ways, like, mathematical balance is bullshit, right? Like, it will never give you exactly what you want. It, like, you can't rely on the numbers. What you can rely on is what is the actual player feedback, what is the player experience, right? And balance it based on that. Because like, I don't really like, I brought up AI, right? I don't believe in balancing that way. I believe in it can help you to point out obvious flaws, right? Like, if some designer carelessly went in and, like, created a weapon and put like really strong values in it, right? And it's an outlier compared to other weapons, right? Like, that's really nice. Like, that we see exactly, oh my God, this had like a damage multiplier on this particular move of 5, whereas normally we only go up to 2 or something, right?
Right.
Yeah, but I think that then, Thomas, like, the key here, and I understand Steels and Frosty's complaint, right, on the balancing of Elden Ring, which is like, yes, like, whatever you do, you will have people breaking it somehow, combining this with that, and boom. Even if you put all the mechanisms in Lords, we added even a mechanism about basically equalizing power levels to try to balance, like, so a level 100 could invade a level 10, and the level 10 will still have a good chance, right? But people will always find ways to break it, right? So then at the end, if you look at other examples out of, let's say, the Souls-like genre, right? Like Magic the Gathering. How many cards have been nerfed / removed from competitions, right? League of Legends. On every patch, every month, you have hundreds of lines of things change, like small parameters, like 0.01 seconds for an ability, right? So at the end, I think that what you're saying, Thomas, it's very true. It's like you kind of, let's say, you kind of have to fight and work hard to reach that perfect balance, knowing that you will never reach it. So at the end, what's left after is support, right? So like keep seeing players playing, and adjusting, rebalancing, nerfing,
Yep.
boosting. You know, at the end is and then you nerf something, and then the other thing becomes, the OP meta. Oh, okay, holy shit, how do we fix these guys? I don't know. You know, like there is always ways
Yeah.
that they're gonna break. So I think that at the end it's a matter of support, right? It's
So
having.
let me ask you something real quick, right? We're discussing this whole PvP subject, right, and everything, and you guys obviously went through that already. But let's just put it on the table, right? Like, did you have the numbers? Like, what was the percentage of the player base that actually engaged actively in PvP?
So these are numbers under NDA that I cannot share. I'm very sorry. But let's say more than what we thought they will be.
Oh,
You know?
Interesting.
So yeah. So this surprised us as well. Like oh, people like this. You know, like even if you see like a 50-50 online, we actually saw that in reality there was more engagement. You know, it is true though that some of it is involuntary, right? We cannot discard that great part of the people engaging in PvP was not wanting to do it, you know. So but you know, like we detected some people are disconnecting when getting PvP'd, you know, like they just Alt F4, you know, like okay, fuck this shit, guys, bye, you know. So which is a classic in Elden Ring, by the way, as well. Like,
Certified hood classic on that one, dude.
I'll tell you guys something. So, I mean, we were just surprised by the Together update. That was the last update that we shipped for No Rest for the Wicked, which added 4-player co-op into Wicked, right? And normally what you see industry-wide is that even with games like Path of Exile and Diablo and so on, right, that highly encourage you to play together, right? And a lot of players will only really take an ARPG seriously if you have proper multiplayer in there, right? Like, certainly true for me. Like, when Diablo 2 came out, I played it with my best friend, right? When Diablo 3 came out, I didn't play it solo. I played it with that same best friend again.
Of course.
And still, the numbers were always like 85% of the players will play single player and will not really do much with multiplayer, right? And then you have the 15% that is probably like the more hardcore and so on, right? That will play multiplayer. For us, the numbers that we've seen is basically 50-50, which is pretty fucking bananas. Meaning
that is insane.
That 50% play single player, but then the other 50% are split between playing the game together with 2 players, 3 players, or 4 players, right? And that should really tell us something. Because I think it's because of the combat. I think it's because of that, right? I think that's why you're seeing that kind of engagement in Elden Ring and so on, because we're really kind of like at the precipice of something here, where I think what you're seeing there is like, hey, these are 3D fighting games, and there's a clear love for that, but the industry isn't really engaging with that, right? Like there is no amazing 3D fighting game that everybody plays, right? But you have people like Steel that, or even you, Frosty, right? Like that just spent hundreds of hours on Elden Ring and Dark Souls and so on,
if only.
and like that kind of thing, right? So let me ask you guys, like, why are you doing that? Like, what is the main motivator for you folks?
There is no alternative.
Yeah, and I mean, dude, like this is the perfect
meaning
opportunity.
that you love it, right? But there isn't really, like, you're not being served by the industry, basically, correct?
Yeah,
Right?
this
Yeah,
is
like,
Please,
there's
Frosty,
a
continue.
huge demographic, I think, that is untapped of players that would love to engage in this very, very unique style of player versus player engagement, you know? And like what kind of bouncing off of what Steele's points were earlier, describing, you know, like the jumping mechanic, the addition of that with Elden Ring, the crouching mechanic, all of that stuff, the core fundamentals of what make From Software's PvP so unique and is not offered by anything else that exists currently. you know? And those things are, like Steele mentioned, the spacing element, the ability to strafe around certain attacks too. Like a thrusting based attack is, you know, something that is with that frontal cone, right? But if you like read that they're going to do a thrusting based attack, you can strafe around them and get like a backstab potentially, right? Or like if they're using a thrusting or horizontal based attack, you can then jump over that. You have all of these extra means to think about and juggle all on the fly, dude. And there is not a single game, and I'll speak to a recent experience. Me and my brother were playing testing out PvP in No Rest for the Wicked the other day, and we took in a very early characters, and we just had some of the base starting weapons because we were testing a bunch of the movesets and stuff like that. What you guys have with No Rest for the Wicked, outside of like the super crazy shit, because we didn't test any of that, we were doing things without the affixes or enchantments and stuff like that, just testing the core fundamental combat design and how that feels to engage with on a one-on-one basis in that duel scenario. And oh my god, dude, the way you guys have designed the parries to work, the way you guys have designed the charging attacks, so like my brother would hit me with something with like a spear, an uncharged spear R1, right? And then he would be charging up the follow-up swing and then jabate me to panic roll because I think a fast one's coming. And then the charge attack then lunges forward and roll catches me, right? Like all of these elements, like just blend together in such a way that are absolutely spectacular, And like you mentioned earlier with like the 2D fighters, like you can, shuffle around the opponent, right, on that singular axis, but it doesn't actually provide you any forms of expression in a true 3D spacing environment, right? And all of these things culminating together, I think there's a very interesting topic to be tacked onto this supplementally, and that is what you talked about with Chris Wilson briefly, which is the dexterity-based approach that players tend to have, as well as an intellect-based approach. That being, the intellect-based approach is more based around, oh, what can I do, with my build to help me overcome this particular encounter or beat this person in PvP, right? It's like the think tank approach. And then there's also the dexterity-based approach of, oh, I pressed my button faster than this guy and I hit him, or I rolled his attack because of it, right? And creating that, like a system effectively to support both audiences and both approaches that players tend to have within their how they see the game and what they would rather engage with. And I think this leads into a bigger discussion about what you talked about earlier with, like you guys, that's going to be hell to try and balance with like all of the affixes, you have the enchantments, you have all of these other things. And that leads into a bigger point, which is, what do you guys think about the concept of PvP templates to provide an alternative?
That has always come up. Yeah, exactly. Right. So that is the way to balance it, right? Like I can already tell you, just mathematically, there is no way that you will have like esports level stuff in Wicked, right? Simply because there's like, if you really break it down, there's potentially like millions of fighters in this game, right?
Yes.
And having that balanced, no, like it's just never going to happen. Just
mathematically,
it's basically impossible, right?
Yep.
But what you could do is, you could absolutely, like, let's take the story characters, right? I could have
exactly.
I built whatever, Odessa as a Shoto or something, right?
Yes.
That kind of thing. We could totally do that, and that could be balanced, right? Like that could be, okay,
Agreed.
here's our 20 characters, and we actually balance them against one another, right? So if you want the competitive experience, you play these characters, right?
Right.
If you want the crazy experience where you just try your RPG character and so on, you do that, right? Like, and I think both are valuable and both are cool. But I think generally what probably happened with Elden Ring and the Souls games at large, right, is that they probably threw multiplayer in there. I doubt, and this is the same thing that I talked to with Chris Wilson about, right? And I mean, it is especially true in those other ARPGs, right? Because you have basically point and click combat, which you will never have proper PvP if you have a point and click model underneath it all. simply because there is no design space there left, basically, to have real depth. But I doubt that they consciously designed a lot of the actions and moves and so on in the Soul series with the same, in the same way that a Capcom would approach a fighting game, right? Where for every move
Exactly.
that you actually think about startup active recovery, and you think about frame advantage, and you think about footsies, and you think about whiff punishment and so on, right?
Yes.
I doubt that's the case. I think that just naturally kind of happened because they had an animation commit combat system that works for PvE, right?
Right.
But ultimately, if you want to deliver that kind of like PvP experience, you have to think about that. That's a lot of the things that that have fighting games have already solved over the past 3 decades or so, right? Where it was just like where the game was literally just, okay, here's our, with Street Fighter, it started with 8 fighters, right? Here's our 8 fighters, and we kind of like need to balance that against one another, right? And so they learned these tricks. And I mean, that's how we are approaching it, right? Like even from very early on, I didn't want to repeat that mistake that Diablo 3 made, right? Which was, okay, yeah, the PvP mode never actually shipped, right? And the reason why it never shipped is because, well, it was just balanced, and like all the skills and so on were created for the PvE without anybody thinking even about the PvP, right? And PvP isn't necessarily something that you can just shoehorn in after, right?
Agreed.
If you have a class that is all about crowd control, well, how the fuck does that work for PvP, right? But with Wicked, we've always in development kind of like looked at our moves and so on, and that's what you noticed, Frosty, right? That yes, we did take that into consideration because we always played tournaments internally, right? Like we always had people playing against one another and noticing and reporting, oh, if you do that move, then I can immediately follow up with this, and I can completely cancel out neutral and so on, right? But that's how we're looking at it. At the same time, I think there is a huge opportunity there, and we recognize that, right? Like we always knew, hey, that just a co-op experience could make for a huge sales boost because people love co-op, right, and would love to play together. I think the PvP thing is probably a similar big spike, right? Where there's a lot of people out there who love fighting games, who love just competitive games, right?
Yes.
And if you give them a mode where they can actually play together that way, and you do the regular things of like, oh, there's actually a ladder that you can climb, right? And like, I'm in Diamond League now, and I really want to get to, or I'm in Platinum, I really want to get to Diamond, and that kind of thing, right? People would get really excited about that, right? And then like we'll see what happens, right? But that's how we are approaching it. We're literally like, you have to be honest and say, and look at the genre and say, it is a 3D fighting game.
Yes,
it clearly is. And how can we improve upon that and make that an actual thing? I'll say one last thing because that was really interesting. As part of the class system, this is exclusive info. I've never shared this outside of Moon before. But as part of the class system, one of the things that we just noticed was that, well, I always wanted to introduce a combo meter or something in Wicked. Something that, because we have all these enchantments that are like, hey, you get like some extra health if you do a perfect dodge or something, right? Meaning that if you dodged an attack that would have hit you, but it hit your iframes, right? And we always wanted to reward that, but there was never clear feedback for that. So we now have this call-out system that started as a typical combo meter, right? And we just added things on top that will tell you that very clearly. And the thing that we did to reward that is, well, that actually fills up your super meter, meaning that every class that you play will inherently have a super attack, right? So what happened is that we basically moved from Wicked being like Street Fighter 2 to, okay, now it's like Super Street Fighter 2, because now you actually have to, or are encouraged to not repeat the same thing, right? Meaning that if you just do combo hit 1, combo hit 2, and you're just repeating that you're not getting the same bonuses as if you engage the enemy with, say, a parry followed by a perfect dodge followed by a backstab, right? That ups your amplifier and like fills your super meter much quicker, right? And then you have all these, okay, now my super is ready. I'm just waiting for the perfect moment to fuck you
Yeah.
up, right? That kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly. That's amazing, dude. Like creating a way to organically encourage players and have a reward structure in that to rewarding them for doing stylish shit in your video game, dude. Like
Yes.
that's so cool, dude. That's so cool.
This is that element of the wow effect, yeah, that is probably the most important to any game imaginable. Yeah, that's how you buy gamers, especially of the casual type. Yeah, there's definitely the most of them. Yeah, you need to introduce to the game something that just makes them say wow. Yeah, I think like it kind of loops back to what you were saying, yeah, about Elden Ring and how big of a success it is. You guys mentioned if like for one, like part of the success of Elden Ring isn't for one the fact that invasions has got tuned down, yeah, but
Right.
frankly I think like the biggest selling point for one in case of Elden Ring is that wow effect. Like similarly to how I think it is fair to say that Elden Ring wouldn't exist without The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. Because it kind of is similar concept after all, yeah. Just that Miyazaki took their formula and like slapped onto it Breath of the Wild formula, yeah. Breath of the Wild sold 37 million copies at the given moment, yeah, and it's kind of like Breath of the Wild has this wow effect, that like moment you are getting out of the initial chamber, like and where you spawn as Link, and then you have this entire world just stretching ahead of you, and Elden Ring also has it, yeah. So like even in case
and
of
providing that in all sorts of different avenues that the game provides too. So like providing that in a combat sense, providing that in an explorative sense, providing that in a world design sense, all of that, you know, just supplementary to your point. Keep going though.
Yeah, and I guess even if it is something technically smaller in the meaning that less people going to interact with the game overall than people that gonna interact specifically with PvP, the wow effect is exactly as important. It is the most important hook, yeah? And like giving something that you just said, yeah? Like possibility to just literally style on your opponent, and it is actually effective way to win. That's a win condition. To being stylish as fuck is very important, probably, yeah? I would say.
Is that this system even acts almost as a tutorial for bad players, right? Because what it does is that if you just play in a way where you just walk to the enemy, hit them once, walk back, walk to the enemy, hit them once, right? Like your combo meter will never fully build. And that will tell you something, right? Like it will just, like the way it works is that if you hit the enemy, right, it just says good, right? But then you have to hit them, like you have to hit them with like a variety of moves, right?
Yes.
And for that to fill up, for the rating to go from good to great to excellent to amazing to godlike, right? That kind of thing. And you want to hit those high numbers, but the only way you hit those high numbers is, it's very similar to like how you play a Devil May Cry, right? Or a even Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or something, right? You want to get that fucking multiplier up, right?
Yeah.
And if you see constantly, hey, I'm playing the game, I'm kind of succeeding, but the game is always telling me, hey, I'm just doing good and not better, right? Then I will, at some point, I will learn what does it take to actually play, get to great and to excellent and so on, right?
Yeah,
and
it causes player intrigue, you know, to be like, oh, what is this? I want to actually engage with it. Yeah, genius.
Exactly, right? So and then the nice thing is, well, you're even getting rewarded for it, right? Meaning that if you actually use different verbs, you know, like that's how you build up the super meter fast. Like in the game itself, in the PvE portion, right? Like even if you are kind of like a newbie, you will still build up your super meter, right? Even if you play in a crappy way, right?
Right.
Because it will just take you longer, right? But then what will happen is that this is cool, especially in co-op and so on, right? Or if you play multiplayer, you will see that, well, other players are doing way more supers than I am, right? How does that happen, right? And, well, you know, the game is already kind of telling you that.
Yeah, no, that's extremely cool, dude. How you've managed to actually like bake that in once again to organically, and you just discover that, and it's intuitive more or less.
By the way, I mean, this is one of the things where I was always feeling like why did the Souls games not do that, right? Because it's such an obvious thing. Because, like, again, if you look at the Souls series as like basically 3D fighting games, right?
Mm-hmm.
Fighting games figured out that combo systems are good fairly early on, right? Like you had the shitty Street Fighter 1 that nobody played, that was just garbage, right? Then you had Street Fighter 2, which, as Saul said, right, is like, that was a turning point in the industry, right? That's like, okay, they tuned it to a level where it actually worked. Everybody looked up and was like, okay, whoa, this is something new, right?
Yeah.
And then very quickly, I don't remember anymore. I think it was with, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was only with Super Street Fighter, right? Like Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo only did like, oh, we increased speed, right? But then Super Street Fighter immediately had, oh shit, combos are really fun, right?
Mm.
And then also like, hey, building up these combos and like doing a super is even more fun, right? And so, but we never saw that in Souls games, and I always wondered why, right?
Yeah.
Because it's the same thing.
Well, yeah, it's very fascinating too, especially, you know, talking about like some of the things that your game has done exceptionally well, Thomas, which is the focus system. You know, like I love that effectively you've replaced the MP or FP system, you know, mana, instead of you. I always found it very odd that, oh yeah, you just start with, you know, a full mana bar and then you just mash L2 in the case of Elden Ring, right, with like an overpowered Ash of War, and then you can just like more or less trivialize an encounter from range, things like that, right? And
I also always
with-
hated the system of like, oh, I have to change my Estus flask, right? Like, do I
yeah,
fill
too.
up health or do I have to fill up mana? Like, that's
right,
such a shit
yeah.
way of
So
doing
it's
it.
like where you guys like innovated on that front is with the focus system, where your focus meter, it starts out from 0 and it rewards you by filling up that depending on how many hits you actually land on your enemy. And then that's what allows you to use things like Ashes of War in Elden Ring or your runic based attacks in No Rest for the Wicked, right? So it's like you're incentivizing players as much as humanly possible to actually engage with the foundational core elements of the combat system and rewarding them as such, you know? Like that is so much better, I think, as a system than a traditional mana system, you know?
I would agree. And I think about the PvP aspect here, right? Like if you
Yes.
fight against a mage, mages have been traditionally pretty garbage, right, in the Souls games in terms of PvP.
Well,
but you guys
they've
would have to tell
been
me-
annoying primarily is the main issue with like, and this is a really big discussion. I'd be keen to hear what both you and Saul think about just how to approach ranged combat design to not have it feel as though the players are cheesing or trivializing certain encounters. You know what I mean? Because I think that's a big thing that even like From Software has struggled with all throughout their games, you know? Like even to the point where in Elden Ring there's an example of they like nerfed bows so much to the point where you can't even like take a bow and align it with any other particular scaling type because they were so worried that, oh my god, dude, you know, like people are just going to sit back with their poison arrows and cheese everything, right? So it's just like it's a very, very difficult thing, I think, to get right. And obviously,
I would love to hear from Saul. Saul,
yeah,
in Lords of the Fallen PvP, how do you guys approach the whole problem with ranged attacks and mages?
Actually, concept is so cool for that.
mm-hmm.
So yeah, in that regard, there is several ways that you can approach it, right? From the obvious one about balancing, which you will always, you know, it's always the never-ending fight we were talking about before.
Yep.
To the difficulty of usage, right? So, for instance, it's not the same to throw a spell that auto-targets the enemy and hits for whatever amount of times with whatever amount of poison and then does damage over time, than making that same exact ability with the same outcome, but that requires a skill from the player that drops it, right? So I think that the hardest part, and this is what we work the most on Lords 23 about this, was the anticipation of such spells, right? Because usually what happens a lot with the spells is that suddenly you see like this wall of flames, like, huh? Where did this come from? And then suddenly this enagram on the ground, like, huh? And then suddenly light, boop, and then you're dead. Like, holy shit, what happened? right? So then the way that we try to make it in Lords is treat it like we do with the normal combat. In normal combat, we have a very strict rules in terms of frames per attack. What does that mean? It's like we had an anticipation, a delivery, and then a recovery, right? And then we were very strict on these frames that each of these steps of an attack will take. Basically, it's like when you do this, you're committing, right? While you are in the delivery, you cannot cancel. So then, okay, you learn every weapon is different, different damage output, compensated by, okay, how many frames it takes of the initial step to the end of it, right? So then we try to use that same logic in Magic. So then whenever somebody was casting a spell, to have a clear indications on, let's say, the mage, and then on whatever the thing is going to happen. Plus adding for the mages a bit of a skill check. So it's not just a free, a freebie hit, right? So it depends a lot on each spell, because every spell is very different from each other. That's the cuteness of Magic, right? Like being able to play a lot with this. But that's how we approached it. So from similar
what was
to
the resource to cast spells in Lords of the Fallen? Because the problem in Souls games has traditionally been mana, right? I think mana in those games is fundamentally shitty, right? Because it's like, yeah, you start at 100 and you just shoot a bunch of times, and now, okay, I can't, like, I don't have any mana left, so what am I left with,
Yeah. So in Lords we had mana. Effectively, we had mana. That, well, through your RPG layer, you can upgrade, you can make auto recover, you can exchange, and this is one of the biggest things that we added. Is like you could exchange health for mana or other resources for mana. So then this way, like, you created your own strategy, and we had also some spells that directly took a toll on you on what, like we had these two walls, Umbral and Axiom, right? The real wall and the wall of the dead. So then some spells were actually adding Umbral on top of you. So you were doing a risk reward, not directly related with the mana, but the fact that using that spell will create some temporary umbralized HP. So basically, when you got, you imagine your HP bar in red, you use these spells and then you get like a small white overlay on top of it. And the only way to recover that is by harming the enemies, right? Harming your rival. So that's another way that we, basically we try to make like different schools, and every school to try to cater to different types of players, right? So from the classic mages that expect mana, because it's also something that we're playing with always, like player expectations, right? So, okay, yeah, you have your mana. To the guys that were more on the necromantic kind of, let's trade health for power kind of deal. And that's what we did with Umbral, right? So you were using mana still, but also you were using Umbral and your HP basically, and as a trade-off. So we try to innovate there on that regard a bit.
I kind of want to mention that Soul incredibly undersells the system they created in Lords of the Fallen, because fundamentally it's very good, and I really think that Soul literally undersells it right now. So, if you don't mind, I'm gonna take the steer and I'm just gonna present my perspective, okay, for Lord system. Okay, so first of all, combat in Lords of the Fallen is primarily melee focused, but you have 3 different resources that you can utilize in order to use distance type of attacks, that being spells, that being crossbows and bows and yada yada, yeah, and also umbral stuff, which is basically lamp mostly. So you had mana, you had ammunition, and you had Jesus, please remind me the third one for umbral lamp. You had like these umbral points that you were using for umbral lamp.
Yeah, yeah, you can call them the umbral points. Yeah.
Okay, let's call them umbral points. Yeah. So here is a thing. So you could seamlessly use all these tools in the combat. Like for one, you are fighting someone in the melee combat. Yeah, you're fighting them, and then boom, with the click of one button, you are instantly swapping to the distance weapon to actually surprise your opponent with the shot of the crossbow. You can also unequip your distance weapon in the menus, like enter your menus, quickly unequip it, which gives you opportunity to throw, for example, a grenade. You had like a grenades that were like throwing out the smoke bomb that was dealing poison damage and so on and so forth. So you had actually an ability to very smoothly swap between melee and distance combat in order to surprise your opponent. Or you could also, with click of one button, swap between distance weapon and umbral lamp that you could utilize in order to push enemies around. And the amount of times I have utilized it in order to surprise someone and yeet them off the ledge, so kill them with the gravity kill, well, it's mine. I basically just, I won shit tons of invasions in such way. And fundamentally, this system that was in the Lords of the Fallen was very interesting because, for one, if you are actually playing as a magical type of character, let's say you have a lot of points into faith, and therefore you are using miracles, yeah, in order to like beat your enemies, yeah, you using some melee weapon and you have also miracles, but you're gonna run out of mana. You are not only limited now to refill of your mana. You can literally swap off your catalyst that you utilize to cast your miracles, or however it was called in Lords of the Fallen, like equivalent of the spells. And now you can throw a grenade for one that doesn't use mana anymore, it uses ammunition. So like you are basically incentivized to use in combat these various different types of tools because you just have seamlessly more resources to utilize them. If you're gonna run out of one type of...
Right, it sounds very similar to what we basically have in Wicked, right? Because fundamentally, if you break it down, it's kind of similar. Meaning that the way we solved it was, well, we have the focus bar, right? Let's actually start with the problem. The problem that I always saw in Dark Souls is that the mage experience is shit, right? It was always easy mode, right? Like I play a mage, and I don't have to engage in the combat anymore, right? Like I have my soul arrow, right? Yep. And I just shoot the enemy from further behind, right? And now, okay, half his health is gone. I shoot the soul arrow again, and he's dead, right? And I didn't even engage in the combat. The enemy was not able to even get a hit off, right?
Right.
And that is, to me, that is fundamentally broken, right? There's just like all the good stuff that comes from the melee combat of like me having to roll away, to dodge, to strafe around the enemy, to really engage, is gone if you play the mage experience in a typical Souls game. And that kind of sucks, right? So what you absolutely always want is engagement, right? Which is why we switched to the focus system. So the idea isn't that, oh, I'm starting at 100 and I run out, and then I have to sit at a bonfire or drink some potion and it fills up again, right? Because that whole thing of like switching the potions, I hate that. I hate that there is, in order to heal, I press a button, but then in order to heal my magic, I have to swap, and now I have to hit that button, and then I have to swap back to the normal heal, right? So I can get my health back and so on. So that is all pretty garbage. So the way the approach was, okay, so with the mage, we still need to force you to engage in the combat, right? We can't just have you be able to kill the enemy before they ever reach you. Meaning, okay, so in order for you to cast spells, like to do the hard-hitting stuff, to do any kind of rune attack, you need to build up focus, right? And then the problem was, well, players didn't like the fantasy, right? Because now you're getting into player fantasy, right? Like players still want to play a mage that can shoot a fucking fireball, right? Even without first hitting enemies. So the way we then solved it was, and this is where it becomes similar to what you guys just discussed with, like, okay, I can throw a grenade and other things, right? We just basically introduced basics, right? Like we introduced these small spells that are still giving you that fantasy of like, hey, I can cast a fire dart, right? But the fire dart doesn't really deal a ton of damage. It's mostly there to kind of like pepper enemies with, and they will also fill up your focus bar, right? So for all intents and purposes, they are basically just long-range melee attacks, right? Like that's basically how we see it, right? And that creates a nice flow, right? Because now I'm like, okay, so I actually have to engage, and the enemy will actually get to me, and I have to build up for the full meter, right? So now you're kind of like getting the same advantages that melee combat has in the mage combat, and you still give the players a variety of stuff, of abilities and actions that they can perform, so that it solves that for you, right? That is another thing that I would love to see being solved in Souls games, right? Because that I fundamentally don't understand how that still isn't fixed. And to me, like even Elden Ring didn't solve the mage gameplay at all.
No, not at all. And like, supplementary to that, you have some of the interesting iterations that they're playing around with Elden Ring Night Rain with the hero-based structure, and some of the unique mechanics that they're applying to a wide array of basically reinventing how these core foundational combat elements work, So like, for example, in Night Rain with the mage class, which is called Recluse, they came up with a very, very, very interesting system, an innovative system that I've never seen in any other game. And how they have it is basically the Recluse it still functions off of FP, mana, right? But as you're casting spells, right, depending on which spell you cast, you can use the character's active ability to like siphon some FP back after landing a spell, right? And then what that does is it stores the whatever particular element that spell that was just casted with. It puts it into your what's called a magical cocktail, right? And then you store up to 3 elements, and you're getting FP back every single time you decide to harness an element back into your magical cocktail, right? And then ultimately, when you get 3 elements in the magical cocktail, it results in a kind of like pseudo ultimate ability, right? Where it provides a unique benefit. And also what they added on top of that is, depending on which elements you combine together, it does a completely different spell, right? So it's like it allowed them to retain that purely ranged playstyle with the mana system and make it extremely engaging. And when you're taking one of those elements back and storing it into the cocktail, that is a committal based animation where you reach out your arm in front of you and like grab the energy, and you are subject to being able to be hit there, which I think is a very interesting thing that you've also played around with some of the changes that you've made over time throughout the early access period, with like how you had bows, the 3 different iterations, what you guys have done with spells, etc.
Well, see what you did. What happened there is that they introduced this. That sounds very similar to the health rally mechanic that you had in Bloodborne, right? In Bloodborne, you had this whole system where it's like, okay, if I take damage, right, I can actually get some health back,
right,
if I just hit the enemy now, for some time, right? So it sounds like those devs, because it wasn't From Software that did Night Rain, right? But they probably looked at that and were like, well, why not do
From
that for
Software
Magic,
did do
right?
Night Rain. Yeah, they did. It was just a separate team.
Interesting. I thought that was a different development studio.
No. That was all From. It was actually it's an interesting story. It's the lead combat designer of of Elden Ring rather prompted Miyazaki with this project idea, and he was like, I think we can do something here with this, and then Miyazaki gave him the green light. So that's how that actually came to be, which is very fascinating.
Interesting, yeah. But basically, well, I think that's probably how it happened, right? That you like they probably looked at, hey, Bloodborne does this, right? So let's just do that for Magic, and then the same thing that I just said about supers is probably the case here, right? Where it's like, okay, if I siphon enough FP off, cool, that gets me an ultimate, right? Like
yes,
that
exactly. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think too, there's just, man, I'm getting mind flooded. I have so much to say, and I don't know where to begin, dude. But yeah, just like overall with ranged combat, it just feels as though like so many developers struggle with it because it doesn't have some sort of like supplementary element. Because even as I've played No Rest for the Wicked with the way that you guys have it now, there's still circumstances where, oh, this mob can't walk through this hallway here, so that means I can just sit here with a bow or, any semblance of range attack and just cheese it, right? So it's like I feel as though there needs to be some sort of like extra system that like ranged combat needs to engage with or pay attention to that is exclusive to that. Because you think about like FPS design, and things like that where you can miss very very frequently, you know what I mean, and stuff like that. But like in a melee based combat system, you compare the two dynamics of where a player is, up in the boss's grill or enemy's grill and just rolling around, weaving, doing all sorts of these attacks, right? That is the threat that they have to face, is the potential of getting hit, right? And for like ranged players, sure, you can design all sorts of like ranged attacks for the enemies to do, like create gap closers where they dash at you, things like that, to minimize the issue. But I don't think that that's ultimately solving the main problem of what exists within range combat engagement. And I think some sort of the aspect of having to like maybe I'm just spitballing here, thinking aloud, but like maybe time, your drawback on your shot or something, or like have to actually manually aim, so there is that threat of like, yeah, you're going to miss sometimes if you're bad at aiming, some sort of other system, that would basically take the place of the melee player having to worry about constantly getting hit all the time,
There's a difference. So, I mean, it's an interesting subject. That whole range gameplay thing, right? Dilemma
Yeah.
is an extremely difficult problem to solve.
It is.
I think but there is a big difference between, are you playing PvE or are we talking PvP, right?
That's true.
Because with
Yep.
with PvE, I think one of the problems and one of the things that I'm lamenting a little bit, right, is that we have not seen a proper AI push for a long time in the games industry, right? Meaning that, frankly, if I'm playing games right now and I look at enemy AI, and I absolutely 100% would include No Rest for the Wicked into that, right?
Yep.
They're not much smarter than in games that I played 20 years ago, right? It's still the same old behavior trees. It's still the same old thing, the way they get triggered, etc., right? One thing that I would like to see, and Saul is as experienced as I am, right? Meaning as old as I am. It was amazing back then to see the Havoc physics engine coming in, right? And solving one of the long-standing issues of like, oh my God, like how can we create a somewhat believable world, right? And then you saw Havoc for the first time and you were like, oh, are you fucking kidding me? That is so amazing, right? And then you saw the Half-Life 2 demo and you were like, my God, that is fantastic, right? To see that. And I would love to see something similar happen with enemy combat, that there is, like that you would kind of like create almost like a plugin or something, right? Of like, hey, the game understands what enemies can do in your game and they're actually smart about it, right? Like, wouldn't it be amazing if, like, okay, if you play ranged, right, that the enemies don't just do the typical thing, right? Or like our thing right now is like, hey, we have anti-range moves, right? Meaning that if you hit them with an arrow, hey, every now and then they will hit you with their own ranged attacks, or they will pull up a shield or something, right? But it doesn't happen that often, right? And you can certainly cheese it quite frequently, right? But the cooler thing to happen would be, well, what happens in real life, right? Like if you enter my space and you have a fucking bow, I would probably take cover, right? I would probably, oh my God, there's a fucking table here, right? If you come in with a gun or something, I'd flip over that table and take cover, right? Like, so why do enemies not do that in video games, right? And that's a general problem to solve. With PvP, the ranged stuff that we're seeing is that, well, it's fairly easy to just do a sidestep, right? And that's just something in PvE, you don't necessarily always want that, right? It's fucking annoying if every single grunt enemy
Oh
um,
yeah,
act
yeah.
like a real player, right? Like,
Yeah, and that's one of
so-
the biggest issues with Elden Ring's design that a lot of people have like like crucified from software for, is because they started using input reading for enemies
Yeah.
in relation to ranged attacks, you know, and that just feels terrible. That is not a
Mhm.
solution, you know.
Input reading has never been the solution.
Yeah,
It
I mean,
sucks, right? It's
people.
just cheating.
Yeah, no matter if that's let's say more advanced type of player or a casual player, everyone just like they roll the eyes when they see input reading moment. Yeah,
Yep.
and like and more proficient players just abuse input reading in order to get an opening. So
Yes,
so
exactly, right.
this is basically cheesy from both parties, no matter what. And I'm actually, guys, since we are talking now for at least on the live stream, outside of live stream, we are talking for 3 hours now. But on the
Okay.
live stream itself, we are talking for 2 hours and 30 minutes. Would you be fine to move to the section where we're just gonna talk with the chat and listen to their questions? Or do you guys want to
Yeah,
actually
absolutely.
touch onto something else? Okay. If you are fine
Yeah,
with
I
it,
think we touched on a lot of different things, so yeah.
okay, so if that's the case, I'm gonna read the first question that I think is very interesting. What it's like. Oh, and before actually I'm gonna start. If you guys have any questions to either Saul or Thomas or both of them, just feel free to type them in the chat. I am trying to catch them, and then I'm going to be reading them afterwards. So the first one is, what it is like trying to implement PvP with a team. What aspects get discussed the most, and what are the most difficult parts to get right? I guess the question is both to you guys, both to Saul and Thomas.
You wanna go, Thomas, as you are
No,
implementing
Saul,
it
you
right now?
talk, because I feel like I'm blabbering all the time, right? And I don't feel like I'm giving you enough time to speak. So yeah, you go ahead.
So, I mean, like whenever you create any feature or anything that you want to add or improve in your game, right? Like the process, if we could summarize it, because every company is different, every team works differently, etc., etc. But basically, you start by laying out like the high level of what you want to achieve with it, right? Why are you actually adding that thing to your game, and what are you trying to accomplish? How do you? Sometimes it's gonna be how you want to make your players feel. Sometimes it's gonna be because, you know, players just require it, right? Like, hey, we want this. Oh, okay. So at the end, it doesn't matter where it comes from. You are gonna set up the objectives with your team on what do you want to achieve, right? Then when you have that resolved, which sounds obvious, but it's not easy. Why adding PvP in this game? When you resolve that question, that then you move to the how are you gonna add it? How is it gonna work? And from a high level perspective, right? But also from a technical perspective, right? So you kind of go through these steps, and then and this also depends on every studio. The way that I work with my teams is we try it as soon as we can. So we create what we call an MVP, a minimal viable product of that feature, and we just we start trying it, we start playing with it. So we develop a very basic version of it, and we start playing with it, and then we play over and over and over until we are satisfied on the general direction that this is taken. And on every of these steps, every time that we played, we discuss, we basically arrive to some conclusions, even if sometimes the conclusion is we have no fucking clue why this is not working, or like where we should be taking this, right, to make it feel better. But that's basically it. There is no like secret of the Coca-Cola, you know what I mean? Like you just need to start working on it, iterate as fast as you can, and then once you have something that you feel is solid enough, put it in front of other players, right? These other players can be people in your same company that are not assigned to that project, they're not playing that project. It can be, family, friends. It can be any type of shape or form you want to do it. And usually when you feel confident enough, then you put it in front of the players, right? So there's a companies that they do this, a lot of companies. They do playtesting. Basically, they get players that play that type of game, and then you just drop them a Steam key. They play it, and you have the recordings, their feedback, and then you iterate more, right?
Okay.
Yeah, Saul is exactly right. Like that's basically always the biggest thing that you have to do, right? Like as you implement, like do rapid iteration, right? Like rapid prototyping, rapid iteration. You immediately test the feature in the way that is meant to be used and in game, right? And I discussed this with Chris Wilson recently, right? Like ultimately a game's success has a clear correlation to how much did the game developers actually get to play the game, which sounds a bit silly, right? But a lot of times in game development, you have a million tasks to do. And sometimes you just don't get to, oh my God, like this feature is new. I have to test it. I really have to play it in the full thing, right? And then a lot of gamers are getting upset, right? With like, oh my God, this is so stupid. Like there's a feature in there. How have they not seen it? Well, the reason was because they had a million bugs open. And a lot of times, like these engines have also become kind of bloated, right? That is one of the interesting things that we discussed, right? Like we have a nice thing in our engine, right, where we can get into play mode in like a couple of seconds, right, which is great. But still, even to just compile a build right now in Wicked takes around 90 minutes, which is a lot, right? Like, so that means you can make what, like 4 or 5 builds or so a day, right? And if everybody's implementing constantly, the other thing that happens is that every now and then you will have some breakage, right? Like somebody will have broken something. Either the build doesn't work, right? Or, oh my God, they forgot to disable something and now I have fucking text over my screen or some bullshit, right? So really the 4 or 5 builds gets whittled down to, let's say 3, right? So there's a direct correlation between how good is the game to how many times have the developers actually play tested it, right? And then also, well, did you give it to players to actually play test it on a larger scale? Because even if your development development team is large, right? Then the idea or the chance that, especially with games as complex as RPGs and especially ARPGs, right, it's ludicrous to think through, oh my God, there's millions of permutations that could potentially happen, right? And we have 80 people on this. Like, will they see all of that, right? Like even just one playthrough of Wicked right now takes a good 30, 40 hours, right? Like if you want to do an honest run. So that's always the thing, like to hit the balance, right? But to also at the same time be able to iterate quickly and to give yourself the breathing room to actually just fucking play the game honestly, right? And also like take the time then to fix all the things that came up, right? There's an interesting thing that happened recently. So I've been playing around just as a fun design exercise with like, let me get into the weeds a little bit, right? I've always been fascinated with FPGA hardware, which is a chipset basically that allows you to emulate like all the chips and so on, right? And recently, I wanted to check and see how AI is doing, right? Like how complex are these models? How, like, what is the level of complexity that they can solve, right? And I felt like, hey, them solving HDL and like, actually recreating chipsets and so on is a good thing to do. And so I dabbled with that. I went into that and was like, oh my God, like let's design a console here of what would have happened if Nintendo wouldn't have gone with the Nintendo 64 back then, but with a 32-bit system that had 100 megahertz and 8 megabytes RAM and so on. And ultimately I ended up with, I have to check some games and what is open source out there? Well, all the FPS games that John Carmack back then did, he released open source, right? So I basically just did ports of Quake and Doom. And then I started modifying Quake. And a really interesting thing happened is that, well, the game compiles in basically 2 seconds, right? And so it was such a joy to work that way, right? Where it's like, hey, I think of a feature, you code it up, and then literally you just bash in compile, right? Compile, and then bam, you can play the full build with everything in it, right? and it has everything, right? And that is just magical, right? And so as you're starting a new thing, right, like one of the things that I would really keep in mind is that, especially if you use Unreal Engine or Unity, right, like I would like pay extra attention to how long does it take to create a build, right? Always optimize the fuck out of it. And even play mode has to be in the order of at least under like 5 to 10 seconds, right? Not, oh my God, it takes a minute to get into play mode, because that adds up so quickly. That is such a magical thing to find out, right? Like the whole, Jesus Christ, it's incredible if a game, like if you can write up a feature and you press a button and within a super short period of time, you can play the full thing.
All right. I have actually super good questions. Super good another question, or well, the one that I would love to hear the answer to myself. So, how does a game developer like you guys separate actual good feedback versus how a player wants to play the game? Because you know, like
Excellent question.
Yeah, this is actually excellent question. I love it.
So this is a tough question. Yeah. Oh, I mean, I mean, some of it is obvious, you know, like some of it is like just like, okay, I would like to be able to ride an elephant. Yeah, sure. And I would like to have 3 billion in my bank account, you know, like,
Right.
so there is some stuff that is obvious, but then at least the way that I approach it, and this is very personal to every, there is no magic formula again. There is no one way to do things, you know, every developer does it differently. Basically how I like to do it is like hearing the feedback, you know, like whatever it is written on a post, if it's on an angry review of a feature of your game, or on a YouTube video, or whatever it comes from. It's kind of taking all this feedback and then trying to make a mental map. Like imagine this sort of you know, the scenes in detective movies that they have. Oh, we are following this suspect, and then they have all the clues with red lines between the pictures. You know, so trying to build that up based on the feedback, right? Because a lot of times somebody might be pointing somewhere like, oh, this is clearly the issue, this is the problem, but actually that's not the problem at all, because you fix something else, and then actually like somebody's like, oh, this is great, what did you guys do on this, right? And like, actually we did nothing about this, but we fixed this other thing that wasn't directly affecting this, right? And as video games are very complex systems, sometimes it's hard even for us to kind of you know, put the nail on where exactly the problem is, right? So that's why what I try to do always is like try to gather as much as I can, try to see correlations between the different problems, and then with the team, with the dev team, we try to figure out how we can address those potential issues, right? So in general, though, I will say that even if I was joking at the beginning, there is no bad feedback, you know, because even bad feedback, it's okay, because then you just cut it very fast. You see what I mean? So the at the end, it's a matter of how what do you do with the feedback. This is the important part, right?
I usually categorize it into experienced and inexperienced feedback, meaning I'll give you examples. Inexperienced feedback to me would be, I a couple of months ago, I had someone in our Discord basically asking very passionately, right? Like, we should add jump to Wicked, right? Like, just add a jump button, right? And it's this whole thing of like, as a gamer, right? Like, if you're just a gamer, you never try to develop a game. You never really thought much about the design behind a game and how all of these systems work together and so on, right? You just play a whole bunch of games and you see a feature in one game and you want it in another, right? And with that guy who wanted jump in the game, right? Like, there was this clear thing of like, well, he never really thought about what that means, right? Like, and he probably doesn't have the experience to understand that, but that would not really work, right? Because us adding a jump has a dramatic effect on the combat system. It has a dramatic effect on, oh my God, none of these levels were ever designed with the player being able to jump with a jump button, right? Like you can jump in Wicked right now by running off an edge, right? And then it does the auto jump, similar to Ocarina of Time and so on, like the Zelda games that came out in that period. But they were never designed with that in mind, right? But a gamer does not necessarily understand that, right? They just think, hey, the developer is lazy. Why don't they want to add this, right? And all of that stuff, right? And it's like, no, we're not lazy, but we have to think about it because we're not adding random shit to the game. So, and that doesn't necessarily mean that that feedback is bad, right? That could lead you to, well, why does he want a jump button, right? What does that even mean, right? Like why does he make that request,
exactly where
right?
it comes from, right? Like, is he
Exactly. So that's
lacking on
what
challenges on the environment? What is it, you know?
Exactly, right? Or just, is it like, does he not like the current jump thing, right? Like any of that stuff. Then the experienced feedback, like some of the feedback that you guys gave right now, like some of the observations that you guys made, right, is that I would put that into experienced feedback, meaning that you guys clearly come from, oh my God, you spent thousands of hours in Souls games. You already kind of like speak the language, and you probably wouldn't, have any problem in our discussions in our own design teams, right, where we discuss these things and debate on like how should we do certain mechanics and that kind of thing, right? And that is obviously easier to address, right? Like if somebody comes in with, oh my God, I thought about this, I played these games for thousands of hours, I know exactly kind of like how this and this and this should work, like why not do it that way, right? That is easier to address. But ultimately, the way I do it is that A, I do that, and B, over the years, I kind of like learned to trust my gut a little bit, right? A lot of times as a developer, you already know, because there's an interesting thing of like how our brains work, right? Where intuitively, you probably will already kind of like just as a snap decision, right? Like understand, oh, that's a good idea, or oh no, that's not a good idea, right? And consciously, you're not understanding fully, well, why do I think that's a good idea, or why do I think that's a bad idea? But I would say as a designer, right, or as a developer, just have the faith to trust that there's probably a million things going on in your brain right now, right, that lead to you having that notion of that's a good idea, that's a bad idea, right? Even production-wise, right? That if I hear somebody wanting to do something like that, obviously what's in your head, or like what's painting your decision is, oh my God, I tried something similar on another project and it was a nightmare. So let's not make that same mistake again, right? So ultimately, it's a lot of that stuff, right? It's a lot of just, is it a good idea? Is it not bad? Is it a bad idea, right? Like, does it strike me as something reasonable to do, right? Like, and does it feel right, right? So that's it. And once you kind of like combine that with, well, I just played the game, right? I just ran a playtest, and that thing that some player brought up would actually really have improved my experience, great, then let's do it.
Yeah, that was really, really well said.
All right, I got another one, which is correlated to the previous one. I gotta have to kind of transform this question though, because you guys partially answered part of it, but basically the question is about bringing quote-unquote competent players, for example, from other Souls games, to give you feedback directly. Do you guys think it is a good idea, let's say, to bring, I don't know, let's say, like Soul in the past, Soul in the past brought me and another content creator that is focusing solely on the PvP in order to give feedback on the Lords of the Fallen PvP, do you guys think it is actually something that makes sense for you, or rather not, like bringing competent players, maybe like speedrunners and so on from other games is not exactly that good of idea because of, I don't know, potential bias towards game that they are speedrunning and yada yada yada, So my general question is, what you guys think about bringing a competent players from other games in order to give you feedback on your game? Is that a practice that you guys actually enjoy and you actually do? This is something that maybe you are willing to do with your games from now on in the future. What's your thoughts on
100%.
it?
I mean, I even hired people straight up, right, that I saw that are really good at like Souls games, and they tried Wicked, and they made their videos where they broke things down and so on. And I was like, okay, well, let's pop them a mail, right? Let's see if they would actually like to work in our QA team, right? Like because if they're already spending this much energy on like breaking down how the game works and
Yeah.
this and that, right? Like they might as well just do that for us, right? And we get all that information right away and don't have to wait for a release and then breaking down and so on. So that makes sense. The only request there I would have is that no, they do still need to be familiar with your title, right? Because for example, with us, yes, we have Souls-like combat in the game. Like it is very similar to Souls or Monster Hunter or that kind of thing, right? But it's not quite the same, right? So
Right.
I would not straight up, like go to someone who played a lot of Souls, right? Because it's not 100% applicable, right? Like there has to be a measure of, well, that person has also shown that they are really in love with Wicked, right? And then it becomes interesting, like that they deeply understand what our approach is compared to a Souls game, right? That's how I'd approach it, right? Like just straight up, hey, somebody plays a lot of Souls games. That might be interesting when you're still in development and your game isn't out there, right? And you just want to see, hey, would Souls players enjoy this or that kind of thing. But I mean, we are at a point now where it doesn't necessarily make sense, right? Where the requirement would be, no, you need to actually have played Wicked, right? Even if you're a Souls content creator or something and spend thousands of hours on Souls, right? Like I would want to see that, like that you can actually apply that knowledge to the rest of the Wicked.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Well, still you just said it right. Like that's how we got to meet each other. Similar to what Thomas was saying, I just looked up for streamers that were playing the game. I knew you before that still, so and I was like, hey, okay, let's contact him, right? And then that's how we do it. So you guys are experts on that, let's say, genre / play style, how you want to call it, right? And then from there, well, we take it from there, right? Like because it is true as well, like that this is very healthy, like for us to talk with the potential audience that we're gonna have, right? Because at the end, still, like you play Lords, right? And you actually completed Lords several times.
Oh
So
yeah, like 4 or 5 at this point.
exactly. So then that's the feedback that you can give us, even if it's based on other games. It's very valuable for us, right? Then of course, as I was said before, we filter, right? Because sometimes we filter because we don't have time, like as you very well know still.
Oh yeah. I mean, I could argue that because I still remember that you spent with me 8 hours certain day just playing co-op with me and talking about game industry.
Yeah, exactly. No, but that's the thing, right? Because the ones we generate, this relationship, we wanna know, like how do you think, how do you approach things, so we can make sure that we're doing the right thing, right? So there is a lot of checkpoints that we do, right? With a lot of different angles. We talk to a lot of people, and we get feedback from a lot of different sources, right? So that doesn't mean that we put, going back to the original question, right? That we put these, let's say, external collaborators in charge of the design, right? Because then basically what you're doing is like let's say, like a design by committee slash, like a strange mix of ideas that might not even fit with each other. And sometimes you just don't want to copy, as Thomas was saying. You want to improve somewhere else. For instance, if we will have gone directly to and ask like a Souls-like player for our combat design, we will have never come up with the integration of, as you very well explained before, still, of range combat with close combat, right? So that's something that, because we wanted to push the envelope, that we achieved, right? So it's always a balance work, but it's always very healthy. Even if sometimes it's just to confirm the opposite, like, okay, yes, but we're still going to do the other thing, because then you convince yourself and your team that, okay, this gut feeling that Thomas was explaining is actually something that we don't want to let go, so it is very, very helpful. And on top of this, for instance, as I was saying before, we work with Yui. She's an amazing developer, and I repeat it, an amazing person. That we did that also for Seamless Cop, right? We talked to her, we worked with her, we heard what she had to say, what recommendations she had, what were the things that she was getting roasted from the community. Even the Seamless Cop, we all agree it's amazing. There is still people that complains. Okay, so she also
and you is
told us about that feedback.
Yeah, you is that type of person too that actually cares even too much about negative feedback. Like I would say that like sometimes Yui actually I guess that's also a good individual to give the feedback, because she basically definitely takes to heart way too much what random guy on Discord actually would potentially say. But I guess it is net positive for you, because then you get in a lot of feedback in that process.
That is the internet, though, right? Like you have to kind of like be okay with that. Like it is what it is, right? There are crazy people out there. Like I got the first death threats ever after I posted on Twitter that, hey, we're currently not making Ori 3, right? And that was followed by some guy finding out our office address, right? Like my office address, and basically threatening to be there at night, right? To kind of like, do something to me. And all of that kind of craziness, right? And there's always nasty shit that you wake up to, right? Like you change the balance in something, right? And you get an avalanche of hate and so on, right? But ultimately,
by the way, sorry, Thomas.
That's
you are not doing
that's the
3?
1 or 2%.
What do you mean you are not doing Ori 3?
Excuse me?
Excuse me?
But ultimately, that's just like my experience is that is the 1% or something, right? Like generally, like talking to people online and all of that, like 99% of those interactions are good. And I love that about games, right? There's recently been a lot of this stuff, like over the past couple of years, right, where AAA developers, like some of them actively post on Twitter like, oh, I hate gamers, they're the worst, and so on, right? And it's like, that is such a fucking stupid thing to say. Like, gamers are the most passionate audience that you could have. They love your product. They spend thousands of hours playing this stuff. They think about it constantly, right? Like, name me another medium, any other product where people are that passionate. I'll wait, right? Like, it's just, it doesn't exist, right? Gamers are the most passionate ever, right? So you are wrong in your head, right? Like, something is wrong with you if you like harbor these feelings of like, oh, I hate gamers and I work in games. It's fucking insane.
And actually, it's indeed, there is a lot of passion, to the point of that you see really silly shit. Like, I remember a review with more than 400 hours on Lords, and saying the game doesn't have enough content. It's like, what? You played for 400 hours? Excuse me, sir?
Well, this guy expected to play 4,000 hours. Like, what?
Exactly.
Dude, we get Steam reviews like that all the time, right? Like, there's Steam reviews of like, oh, this guy played hundreds of hours of No Rest for the Wicked, and now he gives us a negative review because there's not enough content in the game, right? It's just
And the thing is, like, so why did you play 400 hours in the first place? If you don't like it, it's like, do you have better things to do, sir? But again, like the what we used to do then is like contact some of these profiles, right, and ask them, hey, what's up? And sometimes it was a small silly thing or something that pissed them off, like something that I don't know, like a trap or an item that didn't work how they expected, or and then when you actually acted on those, they were suddenly your biggest fans. Like suddenly they become like, oh, they change the review, and because sometimes it's true that we were saying it before about loneliness, right, on the internet. Loneliness can lead to a lot of these things, of people acting weird, like not being themselves, really, right?
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, no, just
That
to add on to that.
that is actually
Yeah,
absolutely 100% like I made the same experience, right? That you had people that were like really aggressive and shitty, right? But then once you interact with them, you know, they're sweethearts, right? But
Yep.
there's just like, that's just something that globally we just have to work on, right? That people feel mistreated or something, right? So they give shit to everything else. But once they notice that you hear them and you have, you know, like they have your attention, right? That it matters.
Yeah, and I imagine that's one of the, you know, like very interesting aspects of doing early access, you know, because I know that in the industry at large, you know, there's a lot of devs out there that are watching other developers that decide to go down the path of early access because, you know, there's this notion that they'll get torn a new asshole, you know, by like going into early access and just like, oh my god, this is such a huge risk, right? But like obviously with what you've done, Thomas, you know, and the success that your game has had in early access, that's a very daunting, you know, undertaking. So like I just if you wouldn't mind expounding a little bit more on the early access side and your experience in relation to all of what we're talking about too, that'd be interesting.
I actually, sorry, Thomas, can I actually just jump in? Because I want to add something to this question. In particular, what you think about type of the feedback that says this game sucks because it doesn't have indicator of the heavy attacks of the bosses? See, that's my favorite review I have seen under No Rest for the Wicked on Steam. Some guy that had like account full of various different Diablo-like games that being Path of Exile, like Diablo itself and so on, just being like, yeah, this game sucks because it doesn't even have indicators for the attacks of the bosses.
You'll always get that, right? Like you will always get, hey, what, this game fucking sucks because it doesn't have that feature from this other game. And then, like 200 hours played, right? And it's just, well, thank you for your $30 or something. 300 hours of play time.
Basically.
But basically, to answer the question, we didn't really have that much of a choice, right? Like I would love to claim that we were so smart and we thought about this and all of that, right? But what happened to us is that we had a publisher early on, Private Division, which was this branch of Take-Two Interactive. And we developed the game. And well, we hit the point where at some point they just said, it has to release now, right? We weren't really finished. We already wanted to like do a lot more, right? And all of that stuff, but they basically forced us to release, right? And we kind of like discussed things with them and we're like, okay, well, look, if like it is a good game already, as you've seen from playtests and so on, right? Like all your folks really enjoy it, but it is clearly not at the point where I would say, well, this is 1.0 ready, right? So they were actually really cool when we discussed the whole thing of like, hey, early access is a thing now, right? And for an ARPG, look at what Blizzard does, look at what everybody else does, right? It is ludicrous to assume that a game of this complexity, that you just throw it out there and ta-da, it's perfect, right? Like that is just never going to happen. And by the way, I mean, the only reason why you have From Software being able to make a new Souls game like that is because, well, it's built on all the other fucking Souls games, right? Like it's not like they're starting everything from scratch every single time, right? Like look at how many fucking assets, animations, icons, everything is taken over from Souls game to Souls game, right?
Trying to make a game like Elden Ring from scratch is impossible. You know, that because that's the culmination.
You couldn't, right? Like it would be prohibitively expensive, right? Like it would be, now you're looking at a game that is like, here's $300 million, right? And would take you 6, 7, 8 years to do. And that actually leads to some interesting things that I've looked at recently. But they like Take-Two basically has treated us really well, right? And was like, okay, then just release it in early access and we'll see what happens, right? So we did, and we just wanted to use early access in the way it was meant to be used, which was just We put the game out there and let's start a community. Let's see if people are interested and how they, and let's see if they can help us kind of like perfect the game, right? And that actually happened, right? So it was a total shot in the dark. We had no clue. We had never shipped an early access game before. We had no clue how people would react to all of this. We were scared to death because all the previous games that we shipped were just packaged products. They were finished and we threw them out there, right? They were also radically less complex than something like The Rest of the Wicked. Like, as much as I'm proud of the Ori games, right? And as much as I do think of them as like, this is a really proud achievement in my life, right? If you look at the sheer complexity of them, they're at 100th of where Wicked is. And so that worked for us. And now we kind of like built this community that really gets it, that gets what we're after, that understands that we're trying to build this kind of like almost forever game, right? And that is super excited about every thing that we throw out there, right? And where they know, well, they have our ear, right? Like I'm one of those crazy developers that do in their personal time scroll through the Steam forums, scroll through the Reddit, scroll through our Discord and so on. I read everything. Even if it's negative, I don't care, right? Like, you can say whatever you want about me and call me whatever name you can think of, right? I will just assimilate all of that, right? Absorb all of that, and then just, make my moves based on that. And I think early access in general is a really good thing to have happen, right? Because games are getting more and more complex. And what early access allows us to do is that, on one hand, it's scary as a developer because you will never sell as many copies in early access as you would at release, right? Because there's tons of players out there who just see early access as like, oh, that's a beta, right? And even if the game is already pretty great in early access, I would argue right now that if you play No Rest for the Wicked, it is a really good fucking game, right? And it doesn't have to hide behind a lot of other games that are already out there that are at 1.0, etc. But it is early access still, right? Like, we haven't really fully put our stamp on it and said, this is the official release, right? It is still in the early access phase. And we just used the early access in the same way that Larian did, right? Where it's about, like, where the goal is, we are just polishing the fuck out of it. We're taking in all the feedback so that by the time we fully release it, and then obviously we do the whole trick of like, hey, we release it on all the consoles, right? So the audience will grow by a lot. And then they will have that experience of, what the fuck? Where did that game come from? Why is it so polished? Why does it have all these features? That is insane, right? Yep. And the answer is because it spent years in early access, right?
Yeah.
And got a shit ton of feedback and got polished to hell and back. And now you're just playing the result of that.
Yeah. That's an amazing thing, an amazing tool for developers to have access to, and to do it in the way that, like you said, Larian have done it, and the way that your studio and you are approaching it. It's just that's an incredibly valuable thing, and I have no doubts that will be the case. I know that the console crowd has been pestering you nonstop since you entered it, right? So just like, give me this game, dude.
Yeah, like when Steel brought up, oh, let's ask some questions, right? Like, we're getting like dozens of times in my emails and messages every day is like, when is the PS5 version coming? When is the PS5 version coming? When is Switch 2 coming? Right? Like, it's just, it is what it is.
Yep.
Actually, okay, so there is interesting discussion in chat, or, well, more like gamers complaining about general idea.
The two are one and the same.
Yeah, I mean, kind of is. About general idea of early access. So, it's more of a question to Thomas than Saul, because Saul, Saul, did you ever release any game in early access? Lords definitely didn't, yeah. So I'm actually just.
Lords had a tremendous amount of post-launch support, though.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like the inverse approach, which is interesting. I think it was like 77 updates that you guys put out since launch, right?
Yeah.
It's still going, by the way. Yeah,
exactly. CI Games is still supporting it live and doing a lot of meaningful upgrades to it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so like further and ending the question, or this is rather my question rather than chat question, but inspired by chat. What you guys actually think of early access? What is your approach to early access? Because here in the chat, I see people being like, I don't like early access. It would be much better to just have beta and early access. Kind of scammy, kind of messages I see currently in the
yeah,
chat.
like there's that notion that's been created, and Thomas briefly touched on that earlier too, where it's like there is so many examples of like quote unquote early access happening and like certain development studios using that, and it's effectively them just deflecting and being like, yeah, no, that's not why we're, doing it, is to actually intake player feedback. We're just doing it because, such and such other reason, right? And I think that creates a certain amount of animosity, because like there is a clear difference between like what No Rest for the Wicked is doing, for example, in early access, as well as Larian Studios with Baldur's Gate 3. Like those are prime examples of what the potential of early access provides, and I think a lot of other studios are guilty of utilizing it for the exact opposite purpose.
Exactly. I think early access just has been abused, right? Like that whole thing, because there's been plenty of developers that put things into early access and then never shipped the 1.0 version, right? Or just, like did all kinds of scammy kind of like things, right? But at the same time, you kind of like have to be clear and say, well, did you like Baldur's Gate 3? Because that game would have never, I guarantee you that, would have never fucking existed if it wouldn't have been in early access. You can't make a game that's as complex and as polished as that without getting that massive player feedback, right? And then, like taking that, like developers being able to take that in and then, creating the experience around that, right? Like and polishing it to that level so that by the time it hits 1.0, it hits that level of, this is fucking brilliant. Like, oh my God, this is crazy, right? Like you couldn't do it because these things are so fucking complex, right? Like I always love that somebody like John Carmack was like, hey, I'm making games, right? And then he started building rockets, right, with Armadillo Aerospace. And I remember him saying something like, well, on a complexity scale level, it's basically the same thing, right? Because it is like it's super fucking complex. If you're making an RPG, it's an unbelievably complex thing to do, and it's like try to build a car in your garage, right? Like that's basically what it is. It's just there's millions of things to consider.
Yeah.
Stats always change. Everything always changes, right? It has a million permutations and so on. You will never be able to get there. And CRPGs are the same thing, right? Like there's also a massive amount of complexity. So I get it from a gamer perspective, right? I would probably like not buy a ton of games in early access, right? I'm also the kind of gamer who's like, oh yeah, like I'll wait till it's finished and then I'll buy it, right? Yep. But at the same time, there's a lot of gamers out there who really like to see how the sausage gets made, right? Look at the food YouTubers, right, out there that are super successful right now, right? They're really into food and like really want to know what are the tricks that these cooks use, right, to make food in restaurants taste better and so on, right? And those people enjoy the fuck out of early access, right? And they like being in touch with developers and actually being able to give feedback. And here's a game that has all that potential, right? And like if they would just implement some of my ideas, like it would be so cool, right? And I don't see a problem there, right? So because the gamers that do not want early access don't have to buy it. The gamers who do,
that's what I was
like early
about to
access,
say.
can buy it.
That at the end, it's like nobody forces you, right? Nobody comes to your. Thomas is not going knocking doors, tock tock. Hey, buy my game in early access. With a gun. Like it's like you choose to buy it or not, right? And as Thomas is saying, for me as a developer, it's fantastic because I can see the evolution of a game, and if I'm hyped like I was back in the day for No Rest of the Wicked, I bought it day one that you guys put it alive. Like, okay, let's go.
Thank you.
I've been following it through all these years, right? But at the end, it's like this happens as well with, think about it, with TV shows on Netflix, right? It's like there is people that cannot watch a TV show while it's going. They prefer to wait for the show to basically be over and then watch it all in one weekend. So this is the same thing. It's like, do you prefer the thrill of watching one episode and then having to wait for 1 week to watch the next one? Or do you just prefer to see it all in one go, right? So it depends. It's like, and some days you might choose one and some days you might choose another. You see, like, there is no. So I understand why some people might not like it, but then I would just say, well, so then just wait. It's fine.
At the same time, I think early access is a thing that is heavily dependent on the developer as well, right? Like, do you trust the developer behind the game or not, right?
Yes.
So if for example, if Miyazaki from Software would right now, right, go and say, hey, we have Dark Souls 4, we put it into early access, like, I would almost be certain, right, that every single person in this chat here would buy it anyway, immediately. Day one.
Yep.
Doesn't matter, right? Like,
but the backlash would be actually huge, though.
$100, I don't care.
Yeah,
of course it would be, because it doesn't make sense, right? Because they sold 30 million copies of Elden Ring, right? They could afford it, but the way that I think that early access is still kind of like in its early stages, right? Like, because game development has existed for what, like since the 70s or so, right? And early access has existed for what, like maybe 10 years, a little bit longer, right?
Yeah.
So it's still a form of publishing or something that is still fairly early, and there's already been some abuse and that kind of thing, right? And the way I would want people to see it is like, early access, clearly, if it's done right, allows development of games that otherwise would have never existed in that form.
Yeah. And I think that the developer is the key part here, right? For instance, now if you guys do another early access, you have won the trust of the community, right? So it's probably going to work out well for you. Same thing, like there is a lot of studios like this. Of course, Larian, if now they do, hey, we have now, I don't know, RPG Nyigi, whatever new RPG they do, and they put it in early access.
They already announced that. They already announced that, by the way, right?
So there you go.
Already said that. Yeah, so Sven Winke already said that, right? He was like, hey, so we don't have to do early access for Divinity, right? But we absolutely will, because that was the result to success for Baldur's Gate. So why the fuck would you not? That's crazy.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Go on.
And the audience will trust it, right? Same like for other studios like Amplitude, Amplitude Studios, that they do their games in early access, and it's fantastic, the results that you get at the end of all the early access process, right? So at the end it's a matter. I wouldn't put everybody in the same basket, but it's true that there's been some studios that actually has scammed people, period.
Yeah.
And this has happened. And yes, those always put a bad mark on the rest, right? That
I actually have
we've seen this all the time, right? Like, you've seen a similar thing with Kickstarter projects and so on, where there's been so many fucking bullshit. Like, here, I'll make an MMORPG. I need $1 million in funding, right? And it's just, of course. Well,
I have actually follow-up question then. And that's kind of like question to both of you guys, but it's going to be a little bit different per person. So to Thomas, the question is, would even No Rest for the Wicked survive if it wouldn't be in early access? Would it be actually ever released? And the question to Saul is, why the hell Lords of the Fallen then wasn't in early access?
I can answer mine. So it would have released in one way that wouldn't have been amazing, and then that would have been it, right?
Okay.
That's what you would have gotten, right? And I don't think anybody would have been happy with that.
Okay. Why so considering the fact that Lords of the Fallen got immense amount of support, like I think I have never seen that much support to so-called premium game that is not a live service, like Lords of the Fallen gave to their game. Because we are talking here about, well, this game is being supported. You guys constantly, like, well, you are technically not a part of the team anymore, Saul, but you guys used to, like, practically in every few updates say that, oh, that's the last big update. Then a few months later, oh, there is another big update. Oh, look, now you get this and that. Yeah. It's basically, it was something. I literally remember that you were saying that, oh man, like before the release to me and G9, when we were helping you guys with the PvP feedback, I remember you guys saying, by the way, breaking NDA right now? No, I probably don't, but we're probably gonna support the game for like half a year, maybe year at best. Boom, 3 years in, still going strong.
Yep.
So like,
Yeah, well,
yeah.
we adapt to at the end what the audience requires, So if the game is working and people likes it and they keep supporting it and we see that the players are there, then it's like, why not keeping supporting it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why we then do it early access? Because this is a strategy. This is a strategy, a product strategy. How do you want to release your game? Who are your partners as well? You need to think that every publisher works in a different way. So not everybody, let's say, believes on early access or sees the potential of it. So it depends a lot, on the type of product that you're trying to make, how you're trying to position it in the market, etc., etc. And to be honest, the in the case of Lords, after launch, we saw, we got 1 million sales in the first week, and we were like so humbled by that, that we were okay, let's give these guys everything and a bit more. So we went bananas with the updates, and then we kind of went with the flow because we saw there was a good dynamic that we generated between us and the community, and that's why we kept pushing for it. So yeah, that's
There's
kind of
also
about it.
something that changed in the industry. Like when we grew up, right? Like it was traditionally like the typical model of you release a game and that's it, and people don't care anymore, right? And the sales basically go flat, right?
Yes.
And then I think games like Path of Exile and so on clearly showed that if people love a game, it's kind of stupid not to support it anymore, right? Like you could still squeeze a lot of love. Like they had the inverse curve, right? Like instead of it starting really high and then slowly tapering off, right? They started fairly low, and then with each update that they put in, they hit a spike that was higher than the last update, right? So over time, word spread, right? And then even more, and then even more, right? And then lots of people tried it, and at some point they had it polished to a point where it's like, well, this is a better game than Diablo 3, right? And so on. And then it was even a better game than Diablo 4. And so what we've seen is that it's kind of silly forcing yourself to make sequel over sequel over sequel, right? When you can keep supporting the thing that is still good. And that is usually what happens with products anyway, right? Outside of gaming. Like gaming is one of the things where it's like, well, sequels have become kind of like the norm. But why, right? Like you kind of like clearly have to answer the question. Like, for example, right? Like we've seen games like Stardew Valley and so on out there, not just, selling 1 million copies at launch and then that's it, right? But like selling 1 million copies at launch and then by the end of year 2, it sold 3 million or 4 million already, right? And then by the end of year 4, it sold like 5, 6, 10, whatever, right? And so, I would actually make the argument that we hit a level of complexity and sophistication where it makes a ton of sense if you have a product out there that works, that you keep supporting it because the players will probably show up for it, right? And in other games, like if you would create other games, right? I mean, now board games and stuff like that, right? Like it doesn't make, like if I'm the creator of chess, let's say, this is kind of like a ridiculous notion, right? But let's say I'm the creator of chess, I wouldn't immediately storm to creating chess 2, right?
Exactly.
Like just improve the rule set, etc. Or somebody at some point came up with the rules for soccer, right? Like, is the goal like now that we completely change how the game is played, right? And now we're playing soccer with 2 balls or something, right? Or hey, let's just polish the rule set and let's create a league around that and let's turn that into something huge, right? So that it's not just 5 million players on the planet love it, but can we turn it into 50, right? Can we turn it into 500, right? That kind of thing. I've been I've been actually pretty outspoken recently about this change, right? And we just an hour ago or so discussed the whole thing about, hey, if you try to make Elden Ring now from scratch, right, it would be prohibitively expensive and just kind of crazy, right? Like even if you give that to an extremely experienced development team, right, you would look at costs of like, you know, at least 100 mil, right? And it would take you at least like 6, 7, 8 years because the team would also have to learn the ropes. They would have to make mistakes, right? All of that. What I've seen recently is last year I did a prototype inside of Wicked where I basically changed the rule set of Wicked and turned it into a survival crafting game, meaning that now it wasn't the typical ARPG, right? Where it's just, hey, you get quests and you explore and do this and that, right? Now the rule set was you just get plopped into this world and you're asked to survive, meaning, oh, now cut down some of these trees, right? And like building was enabled everywhere, right? So you had to, it almost played like Don't Starve Together, right? So you had to kind of like create some shelter for yourself. And then at night, enemies come towards you and so on. And it's incredibly fucking fun, right? And the thing that struck me was that even after just a couple of weeks of prototyping around with that on the side, by the way, because my main job was still, creating all these updates for Wicked and so on, I had something already that I thought was more fun than Don't Starve Together was. And why was that? Because I had the entire backend there for me already, right? Like I had all these enemies that had interesting behaviors. I had all these items. Everything was already created, right? And I just basically gave you the same thing, but with a completely different twist that made the game, like that turned the game into something different, right? But I still was able to use all the assets. And we've seen similar things like that before, right? Like when they made Ocarina of Time at Nintendo back in 98 or something, right? Yeah. The next move was like, oh my God, that fucking game was so expensive. Let's turn that into Majora's Mask a year later, right? 12 months later. And they made another game from that, right? Having spent probably not even nearly as much as they spent on Ocarina of Time, right? And I absolutely see how players would show up for that, right? Like if I now, with the whole game, No Rest for the Wicked that I created, right, can fairly quickly turn it into basically the best survival crafting game out there, right? Because it has all of those things. Why would you not show up for it, right? Like if you're a survival crafting game fan and it has all the really strong bits that make the ARPG stuff work, but now you play the game in a completely different way, right? That's a really nice way of, attracting a bigger audience. And that works. And in many ways, right, like what we've been discussing here, which was mostly PvP, right?
Yep.
Like that is also a version of that, which is just, hey, we're turning Wicked into a 3D fighting game. And a lot of the players who are fighting game aficionados and so on, right, or Souls PvP enjoyers and so on, would then show up for that, right? It just makes a ton of sense.
Well, dude, and like, supplementary to your point, we also see that happening with what From Software did with Night Rain. That's essentially a spin-off game mode DLC, right? That they sold as a separate game, which From Software got a lot of flack for. Oh my God, this should have just been a DLC, dude, for the base game. But it's like it fundamentally changed how you engage with the video game therein. And then through that, From Software, this was just a side project for them, for Ishizaki to flex his prowess, with a brand new title that he is directing for the first time, given that opportunity by Miyazaki. And I think even with I think it was a tweet that you made, Thomas, a while back where you were talking with one of the higher ups at Riot and you guys were talking about potentially like a animation style commit, MOBA, right? So it's like if you guys pursued that path within your own game and created an animation, commit combat style MOBA, like with Souls-like elements and things like that, oh my God, dude, that would have astronomical potential to the point where like a large percentage of all of the MOBA players or like league enjoyers and stuff like that, they would flock to that and be like, oh my god, this is providing something that no other MOBA is doing right now.
That's exactly right.
Actually-
and if I now go right, and if I'd as a developer, right, if I'm a fresh developer, and I would just pitch a MOBA that does all the stuff that No Rest for the Wicked does. Like, okay, well, now you're looking at 5 years or so of development because you have to first create the world, the characters, all the weapons, all the animations, all the movesets. You have to put all of that together, right? You have to actually make that work. And so it doesn't even make sense, honestly, to start something like that from scratch, right? Because somebody like us could go and just do it as a side project and probably do a really good job at it, right?
And there, look no further than how Fortnite popped off, dude. When Fortnite cropped up, before they created the Battle Royale mode, it was just a wave-based shooter. And then all of a sudden they decided to, add the flavor of the month, whatever was popular at that time, to their game, their format, and boom, becomes one of the biggest games to ever exist, period. So that is like a peak example of that this philosophy works,
That's exactly right. So that's I put a tweet out there recently, right? Because there was all this craze about the metaverse and all of that bullshit, right? With people and especially Silicon Valley investors, right, deluding themselves into thinking, oh yeah, Facebook, right, the company that never made a game, that has absolutely no experience, that would have to hire all these designers that don't have a team, right? Nothing, right? That they would create this whatever super complex game that mimics reality and it would be super fun and so on, right? That, like, to any game developer, I think it would have been perfectly clear that that's a shitty pipe dream that will never materialize, right? But I think there's a lot of really like interesting potential now with some of these power players that you have in the industry that already have something, right? That could potentially become that, right? Because there is this notion out there, and I always had this in the past as well, right? That I would love to have a game that I can basically live in, right? That is just my jam, that I just keep playing, and I know that the developers have my best interest at heart, that they keep developing it, that they keep supporting it, that they keep throwing crazy stuff in, right? And I think that's ultimately how you'd get to that, right? In many ways, by the way, GTA, right, has done the same thing with like GTA Online and so on, right? Where it's just, hey, I like GTA. Why not keep developing stuff and crazy modes and other things, right? And I think that's a big thing that we will see happening, right? But not in the way that everybody thought, right? With like, oh, the big social media firms will do that, right? But that'll come from actual game developers.
Yeah, absolutely.
Actually, I'm going to bring something about that potential pitch you mentioned. Yeah, like let's say a fusion between MOBA game and Souls-like. Yeah, you bring in the MOBA formula and then like you add the Souls-like element to it. And Frosty was kind of like immediately stoked about this idea. That just sounds amazing and it definitely would sell. And we actually had unfortunate example of merging this type of genres that actually didn't last. And like one of example of it would be New World, where they actually tried to implement somewhat of a Souls-like combat to MMORPG, and MMORPG crowd actually hated it. It's actually I wonder if MOBA crowd wouldn't be actually very upset about Souls-like combat in their games, honestly. Because this is actually something that No Rest for the Wicked has problem with too. Yeah, like to a lot of people, like I have feeling like players overall very often just want simplicity. They want to they want to play shooter. They want to play
they
RPG.
Want what they're comfortable with, what they know.
Yeah, and basically, basically, if there is some sort of fusion of genres, then instead of giving it a chance, a typical gamer, at least from that what I see, at least looking at what was happening during the early access launch of No Rest for the Wicked, for one, Souls players were complaining about action RPG, quote-unquote, action RPG elements, in the meaning Diablo-like elements.
Mm-hmm.
Diablo-like fans were complaining about Souls elements, and
Mm-hmm.
I think I made even a video about immense amount of negative reviews that No Rest for the Wicked actually received at the launch. I think, if I recall correctly, there was actually more negative reviews than positive ones on the first day, even though, from my perspective, the game was fantastic.
Same.
That's something that you just have to power through, right? Like, I've been thinking about this a lot, clearly, because this happened to us, right? But yes, there's been a lot of players that, and probably also because, well, I always said that No Rest for the Wicked is an ARPG, right? Because it is, frankly. Like, I also like, because ARPG stands for action role-playing game, and a lot of these players that kind of like complain it's not an ARPG, right? Is that that is such a silly notion, because Diablo 1 played fundamentally different than Diablo 3 does, right? But you have this whole generation of players now that basically grew up playing Diablo 3, and to them,
This
that
is
is
action
what an
RPG.
ARPG is now,
Yeah.
right?
This is very silly.
This is what an ARPG is. And it's completely silly, right? Like, because wait, the fucking first game in the series wasn't at all like that, not even anywhere close, right? Like, Diablo 1 plays way more than like a Souls-like and so on than a Diablo 3 does, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, because it is about meaningful combat, right? Like, it's very slow. It's about it's almost like horror-esque, right? Which also, you know, like, fits the Souls thing. And to some degree, you just have to power through, right? Because ultimately, as a developer, all you're trying to do is, I'm going to try to make a really good fucking game. I'm going to try to do something that is really fucking fun. And if you come in with the wrong expectations and you're expecting Diablo from a game that isn't Diablo, and now you're disappointed, or, you know, like, hey, the game is too hard for you, then it's just the wrong game for you, right? Like, that's just what it is, right? But that's why I was always out there kind of like asking people, like, just, hey, try it, give it a chance, let's see what happens, right? And over time, that actually has changed, right? Like, now we have a lot of players that come from Diablo or Path of Exile that always wanted to have meaningful combat in those games, but that never really wanted, you know, like, that we're always scared off by, oh my God, Souls games are so brutal and so hard, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they found their thing with No Rest for the Wicked, right? Where it's like, okay, this is the first Souls-like that I ever played, and it totally works for me, right? And, you know, you just have to power through it. In many ways, it's like the old Henry Ford thing, right? Of like, hey, if I would have asked people what they wanted, they would have said, I want a faster horse, right? But he was focused on making a car, right? So, yes, like, if you, like, ultimately as a developer, you have to look at, how can I improve the thing that is out there? How can I create the next big thing, right? And in our case, that was, you know, like, if we look at top-down ARPGs, clearly, to me, point-and-click combat systems have fundamental design issues that you cannot overcome. And I've seen that at Blizzard and so on, right? So we have to move to a more active model. And so that's why that decision got made, right? So ultimately, it's that.
Yeah, and I think too, there's obviously the genre, you know, thing is a big issue. I think, especially for you guys starting out, you know, being an isometric, you know, quote unquote game, a lot of people got the wrong idea, especially with, you know, you guys marketing it as an ARPG. So then, because that's a loaded term, and the Diablo-like genre, which I think is more applicable to what those games are and speaks to how you engage with them, Diablo likes basically took over the term ARPG, even though ARPG has transcended and means a plethora of different things. There was no specificity made and put in place to differentiate what those games are. In reality, you know, they should have been called something, if you're not going to run with the term like Diablo-like, they should be called something like an IRPG, you know, instead, like isometric RPG, because that suits more of what they are, you know. But I get at the foundations, you know, of where the action RPG term got associated with those games, that being that innovation with what Diablo decided to do, instead of the turn-based combat system, right?
The funny
So
thing
it's
is, if you look at the etymology of it, right, like ARPG stands for action RPG, and it got that term back then because it, like, a lot of these games out there, right, like the roguelikes and so on, or Rogue and so on, right, were all turn-based, right?
Yes.
And Dave Brevik turned it into real-time combat, which back then was like, oh my God, that's action, right?
Yes.
But if you look at it now through the current lens, I would not say that point-and-click style games really deserve the moniker of action, right? Like, it's not.
I agree.
It's not the same thing, right? Like,
it's not
it's almost like
applicable
playing
anymore.
a real-time strategy game. Yeah, it's
right. So it's just it's a problem of them not adding more granularity and coming up with additional terms to associate with what a traditional action or role-playing game is nowadays.
Any action game that you have out there usually defines itself by, I am playing the character, I am performing those moves, right?
Yes.
That is
right.
fundamentally not what happens in traditional ARPGs like Diablo and Perfect Cell. In those, you click on some position on your screen and the character will move over. Fundamentally, it's still a point and click game at heart. It's almost like there's a turn-based core that still exists in those games. And yes, they made it work with controllers, and some of that stuff gets cut off if you play with the controller, but the heart of it, the core of it, is still that.
Absolutely, dude. Yep.
I unfortunately missed one question, but I don't see any more one particular question that I wanted to ask. Saul, let me actually see. So, I cannot find it, but I more or less remember it. And the question was basically since you are not associated with Hexworks anymore, what you are working on nowadays. Is that some sort of new Souls-like? Can you actually say something more about it, or it is all super secret?
It is actually very secret, yeah. So I'm engaged now with 2 projects. But I cannot share anything for now.
Okay. Saul, what is the release date and when is it coming to PS5?
But you guys still, Frosty, you heard a bit about it before, and it's cool stuff. Let's just leave it there.
Okay, yeah, yes, I agree upon, and I am personally stoked. I'm gonna be waiting for whatever is Saul's next move.
Same.
Let me actually.
So, any further questions, Steel?
So here is the thing. I am for the last 1 entire hour or even longer trying to look for a segue to the final question, and I cannot find it at all. So I am going to ask it straight.
Yep.
Why you guys think that there is so little of PvP included in the Souls-likes? So basically, what I meant by that is in nearly every single From Software game, you have some sort of PvP aspect. Like you either like direct PvP or some sort of the way of competing against each other. So you have that entire subgenre of action RPGs games that are called Souls-likes, that are purely based off what From Software started, which is like this specific type of combat, similar to Demon Souls and further Dark Souls, then Elden Ring, and so on and so forth. And these games have PvP. Why?
Let's also be clear, they haven't necessarily started it, right? Like I would say Monster Hunter was probably the origin.
You mean the type of the combat? Okay, got you. But thing is, though, I think Demon Souls is the very first game of this scale that is essentially action RPG with similar with this type of combat, where you have to actually care about your spacing, your positioning, and so on and so forth. And then it has PvP. And then it has PvP. So why video games that are heavily inspired and literally belongs to the so-called Souls-like genre, why these games sometimes they actually engage in co-op and they actually do co-op, but they never do PvP. Like Lords of the Fallen and No Rest for the Wicked is one of very few that ever even tried. Why other games do not do that?
I can count on one hand the amount of Souls-like games that have tried to implement like even co-op, but also PvP. And like being that the Souls-like genre exploding, you know, and From Software basically creating that by hybridizing and all of these different elements from all of these different games and them culminating and creating this brand new genre, I think that it's very fascinating to me. Countless Souls-likes over the years, you know, there's so many, you know, and like it's like a 95.5%, you know, ratio of like the Souls-likes that decided to pursue those multiplayer elements in some way, shape, or form.
So you want the honest answer or the politically correct one?
Preferably honest.
42. No, I'm kidding. So
nice.
But because it's hard, it's very hard. So building a game on single player, it's very hard too, right? And you have certain, let's say, challenges that you need to face, right? Like about the pacing of the story, balancing, like everything going, you know, like being engaging, putting novelties. There is a lot of challenges, right? In a, let's say, in a classic linear PvE game like Resident Evil Requiem, which we can all agree it's a 10 out of 10, right? So that has certain challenges, right? And then when you go into multiplayer, in the multiplayer wall, let's say, you have other challenges, right? Technical challenges, design challenges in all fronts. Everybody gets affected, even art gets affected. So the art, animation, etc., right? So it's hard. So if you think, and it is actually part of the audience actually reacts like this to this type of game, if you think that your audience mainly what they want is mainly the PvE experience, right? Just playing a story, you know, going through an adventure, living the hero's journey on their own, then why would you add cooperative or PvP, right? So it depends a lot on who you think is your audience, and how do you actually want to make these systems, right? Like, what does this bring to the table? Why are you actually making this, right? Because it's very hard. Like everything that you do in single player, you do it in one way, and when you do it for multiplayer, you take a completely different path. You know,
exponentially more complex when you throw that into the mix, I would imagine. You know,
exactly.
Paul is completely correct. The reason why you don't see it, or why most of these games are single player, is because it is exponentially more complex. It's unbelievably more complex. So No Rest for the Wicked, for example, has always worked on the Quantum Network engine, which is basically a rollback network engine and so on. And the entire game is
hammer that point home, by the way, Thomas, because we as From Software PvP enjoyers, we have been brutalized by From Software's netcode issues. So like you saying that your game has rollback fighting game netcode in a similar experience providing the similar experience of what the other games provide is insane.
That's exactly. So that's one of the kind of like magic things that when people tried our co-op, right? Even with shit ping and so on, it feels mostly like local LAN, right? Like it feels really, really good to play. Whereas your typical Souls-like experience, if you play PvP, like we've all gone through the whole, that character is constantly warping and lagging around, and I just got backstabbed by someone. I don't even know how that happened, right?
A mile away.
And it's fucking ludicrous. That's the thing I'm worrying about. Like, will they actually change the entire netcode layer and all of it for the upcoming games, right? Because I kind of doubt it, because that is fundamentally
I think that's a heart surgery moment.
Exactly. So and will you be able to do that heart surgery, right? Like, because they've ran with this approach now for 17 years, right? Like, what is the chance that, you know, in the next couple of years they'll fix it? But we decided that from the very start, right? That, well, we saw already Souls games have that problem, right? So as we make No Rest for the Wicked, let's use a really modern network engine, yet let's actually build it on that, right? So that it does have rollback netcode from the start and so on, right? Because if at some point we want to do PvP and all of those things, right, like you will need rollback netcode, because otherwise it's never going to be working that way. The other thing I wanted to mention is, well, also because just of the complexity of it, right? Like you see Sakurai, basically the health software guy who was in charge or is in charge of the Smash Bros. Series at Nintendo, right? He's always been very like skeptical of the whole, is Smash Bros. A fighting game and is it in the same league as like a Street Fighter or that kind of thing, right? Like he's always been like, don't even put me into that same thing, because I don't support like the competitive thing. The game is just engineered to be fun, not to be a sport, basically, right?
Yeah.
Simply because of that level of complexity, right? And if you put in PvP like that, like even if you go through all of that, you might not want to make it official, right? Because the moment you make it official, that it's like, oh, it has PvP and it's properly fully supported and all of that, right? Like then you have all these people coming in that will see it through that lens, that will criticize it through that lens, that will compare to all these other games, right? And it might not stand up, right? Like, because ultimately, like if you're making a Souls-like, your core experience, right? The beating heart of it is that ARPG experience. It's you playing the PvE mode, going through the levels, you know, getting all these items and all of that, right? And it's like the other part is basically it is secondary, right?
Of course.
And if you make that official, right, like then you will get scrutinized a lot, right? So it's that, like, even if you go through the pain of, oh, we build it on a proper network foundation, right, and we engineer because that is so more fucking complex, right? Like now you have prediction, like every single action that you have, right, has to go through a predictive network layer and so on, right? And even if you go through all that pain, right, are you really focusing on fully and making it real, right? That, oh, it's also basically a fighting game, or, you know, let's see what happens.
Yeah.
Exactly.
You know, I'll go on, Seal.
So I have a quick follow-up question then. Do you guys actually think that it is general mistake that developers do not include PvP in this if they are actually making Souls-likes? Or
I think if you're not basing your game on a proper modern network foundation, you will basically ensure a guarantee that if you ever will add PvP, you will have to go through an extremely painful process of re-engineering the entire game, which is almost like redoing the entire engine, right?
Yep.
Or which is basically what From Software is facing now, right? Will they do it? I don't know. Nobody knows. Or you are just okay with, no, I'm just doing like single player game, right? Like that's it. That's what all it'll ever be.
So usually it is, in your opinion, just better decision to focus on one thing rather than fail in both ways.
I don't know. We made the decision to do both at once, right? But it made development incredibly more complex. Like,
do you regret it though?
No, I don't, because the Together update sold incredibly well, right? And now we can do all these crazy multiplayer things and so on.
That, right.
Like in many ways, the foundation that we have and the framework that we have now is already a lot more powerful than what a Dark Souls and so on can do, right? But we haven't really seen that play out yet, right? Simply because, well, Dark Souls is based on extremely old network and on extremely old network code that clearly isn't producing amazing results, right? Like you're already seeing that. But it's a stupid thing to do, right? Like it isn't something that you really need to do or want to do if all you want to do is, hey, I'm shipping a single player Souls-like.
Right, because that is the foundation and core gameplay design of what makes these games successful. Because at the end of the day, and this is something that everybody, you know, in this community, in your community, and the people that enjoy Souls PvP at large, you know, or any any community for any game that is engaging with a secondary based PvP system supplementary to a overall core PvE based game, like, you have to realize that you guys are engaging with a system that, yes, it is integral to the game's core systems and how we've experienced it with From Software games. Yes, we value it very highly for the impact that it's had on us and things of that nature. But cutting it down to brass tacks, 90%, I would argue the percentage is probably even much higher, of the people that engaged with From Software's games at large have never interfaced with a multiplayer system, period. They have never got to experience invasions. They never got to experience co-op. Look at Elden Ring. That example is the pinnacle example, I think, of this, and it's like, we are a very small subset of that overall, like, experience of that game, and that's important to realize, but it's not something to be, like, reductive or like, oh my God, that means that we don't matter or anything like that, because obviously everything that we've been talking about up until this point today, and the whole reason why this podcast even exists, is because From Software saw fit and a reason to include those systems in their games. There is an intrinsic value in that, and it's not to be dismissive or reductive of that particular element. It's just that overall, we are a very small subset of the overall success, quote unquote, of what makes these games what they are, and I think this might be a controversial statement, but I think that the From Software series at large would have been just as successful, if not more so, without having those in, period. They are supplemental, and they do add a lot, especially the asynchronous multiplayer features and things like that, right? But at the end of the day, there's a very small percentage of the overall consumer base and demographic that plays and engages with these games that don't interface with it at all. And I think, rounding out the point with this, why we've seen so many Souls-likes and developers responsible for putting out said Souls-likes have completely cut out all of those multiplayer-based elements, because they know at a certain point that, hey, the core foundational elements here are still going to provide us with success, So that's I
very
think,
true,
the
Frosty. And
ugly
I
truth.
would completely agree with you, right? So as a developer, you have to ask yourself the question, like, am I making the game for the 95% of my
Yes.
audience, or am I
Yep.
making it for the 5%, right?
Yep.
At the same time, I think everybody in this call here will agree that 5% doesn't have to stay at 5%, right? If we tackle multiplayer
Yes.
right in Souls games, right? If we tackle co-op right, and then also PvP, I think there's a tremendous opportunity there. And you already said it, right? Like, imagine what we can do now, right? Like, we could turn this into a MOBA, right? We could do crazy PvP that, that is unlike anything you've ever seen, right? It is a full 3D fighting game and so on, with rollback netcode and so on, right? You could turn it into a survival crafting game that has 4-player support and so on, or even more, right? You could do all those things, right? So you could see a Fortnite-esque thing happening, right? Where it's like, oh, holy shit, like that 5%, because we hit that Street Fighter 2 moment, right? It exploded. All that tuning is there, and it's now super it's super fun to play with others and all of that, right? But as a developer, if you're not fucking crazy, right, then you will probably make the decision that, I'll start with the 95%, and then let's see what happens.
Yep,
Yeah,
exactly.
but let's
And
also remark one thing that is important, is that cooperative games nowadays, this is data from 2025, right? It's 40% of all the games sold on Steam. And not only this, cooperative games outperform dramatically non-cooperative games on unit sales by a factor of 8. Okay, so this goes back to the beginning when we were talking about isolation and people playing, so there is a need and a starvation for interacting in multiplayer worlds, right?
Yes.
Be it co-op, be it PvP, etc. But it's very complicated. Like, as you see, both me and Thomas, we are like, hey, guys, this is very complex. So just for you guys to understand, imagine in your house, like you just look in your room, right? And now try to put a wire cable to every item on the room.
Yeah.
Okay, that's basically what you're doing, and then what you're gonna have a spaghetti of cables, right? So then you say, okay, so let's use Bluetooth, right? So let's put a Bluetooth receiver on every item on your room, like more modern system, like Thomas was describing, right? Okay, it's a bit more comfortable, but it has its own issues too. You know what I mean? Like nothing is like it's very complex, right?
Yeah.
And then
And once you're done with the wiring, right? Like now you have to think, oh, these fucking cables burn through all the time. So
you
let's
need to-
actually add 2 cables so that if one fails, the other 2 come through, right?
Exactly, dude. Yeah.
and then you have this guy, and this is very funny, that comes into the room, puts the helmet on, but has a fucking tin cap, you know? And then, hey, I don't receive signals. Why? It's like, oh, holy shit. You know? This happens too.
Right.
This is actually the best question of entire podcast. I'm so glad. Finally made it.
Perfect way to wrap everything up, dude. You know?
This is amazing.
But yeah, no, and like just to round out the overall point, you know, like Thomas, what you talked about with what you're seeing with the engagement metrics, you know, of people that are engaging with No Rest for the Wicked, you know, it's like it's 50-50, you know, between the people that want to engage with the co-op and the people that want to play solo. And that proves right there that the want and the need and the desire for these things in a wide array of video games, people want it. They crave it. They fucking love it, dude, you know? And that is the main thing to take away out of this entire discussion, you know? And like it breeds so much life, I think, going forward, you know, if that is at the forefront of these types of experiences, you know, and at the forefront of the minds of the developers that are crafting these kinds of experience and things like that, you know, just being more aware of that as a concept, and that yes, if you build it, they will come, you know. That's it.
I think we should end it up probably with also from the gamer perspective, right? Like once gamers would actually look into all of this and would see how the sausage gets made, right? I think they would have a harder time immediately going, oh, these lazy fucking developers.
Oh, I know,
seen
dude.
a content update in like 8 weeks. What the fuck? You know, it's like, dude, we're literally almost like, it's almost like building a fucking rocket, right? Give us a fucking break, you know?
Yeah. No, and I really appreciate you saying that too, dude, because it's like, that's one of the biggest, you know, discrepancies I see online is like people have no idea how complex even one system is in relation to game design, game development, you know, and what it takes to implement said thing.
Let me ask actually one more
unbelievable.
question, because I'm interested myself. So
yeah,
I'm pretty fucking crazy, right? I'm lucky enough that I have a wife that understands that I'm mad. And I am. I'm fucking 42 years old. I have 2 kids, and I still work basically 16 hours a day, right? I have many weeks where I'm not even able to go to bed because I've worked my ass off and I just fall asleep on the couch in my office, and I don't have the strength anymore to go up to my bed. I have a fucking toothbrush in my office, right? I would like to hear from Saul, kind of like, hey, I'm still pulling these numbers, right? And it is kind of crazy, but given the challenge that we set for ourselves, well, that's kind of like what is required. But what has it been like for you? Because you've worked on the Souls, like, you know how difficult it is and how complex it is, right? Were you also in that camp of just, oh my God, like I'm putting so many fucking hours into this, or how did it go for you?
Absolutely. So basically the way that I like to work is like led by example, right? And then you know, passion is what drives me forward, right? Like passion to make these games, these very complex systems that you don't know how, but at the end it kind of works, you know, like imagine the scene in Frankenstein, it's alive. So kind of that moment. So basically you are, let's say, enduring through months and months and months of like 12, 14, 16-hour work days for that moment at the end, right? in which you launch and then you receive the feedback. You know, this is it's you need to be made of a special paste to
You need
to
to
make
be a little
videos.
bit crazy. Yeah, you need to
Absolutely.
definitely be a little bit crazy if you want to do
Yep.
it, right? And then that's why I said, like, hey, gamers out there, right? Like, if shit goes wrong, right, or if we don't get the balance quite right every single time we release something, right?
Yeah.
Maybe have the patience to wait a day or two, right? Give us a break, like we'll figure it out. But yeah, it's a ton of work, and you know, like good developers already have your interest at heart, right? Like we're trying to build the best thing for you, right? But it is like just realize that is an unbelievably complex thing to do.
Okay, and
Without a doubt.
I think that being said, thank you a lot for participating in this brief 2 hours long podcast. Let me actually see. Oh, yeah, great. It is 5 hours and 1 minute on my recorder right now. Wow. So, anyway,
Good luck editing it.
thank you. God fucking damn it. So, thank you,
My
Saul.
next update delays, then I'll tell people Steel and Frosty is their fault.
We're to blame, dude. Yeah, we'll happily take the blame for that one.
Guys,
This was yeah.
Saul, Thomas, thank you a lot, guys, for sitting through all of it with us. Thank you,
Yeah,
Frosty, for helping me with the organization of all of it. And
of course. Yeah,
my
no,
God, that was
this was
one of
incredible.
talks of all time, that's for sure. And I am definitely gonna try to cut it all down to like 1 hour and 30 minutes max. Which, oh my God.
We'll see. You might have to shoot for the 3 hours, Steel. You know? We had some really awesome things that we talked about.
Yeah, I am.
I think a lot of gamers would really benefit to hearing. You know, because not a lot of gamers get to hear this kind of stuff. And these things broke down to such a granular level, right? So I think there's a lot of value in what we discussed today, and I had an absolute fucking blast.
It was
chatting with you two.
amazing evening. I am actually so glad we actually did it.
Yeah.
Especially because and that's like for me that this entire podcast is actually a good ending after hard fought way to actually organize it, because with Saul it was pretty easy, yeah, because I was like, hey Saul, wanna do podcast? Yes. Okay, contact me later. Okay, and like that was basically it. Yeah, like we exchanged like 3 messages basically for all of it. But taking Thomas on it, it was like it took entire month.
Well, you got to go through the rigmarole of all of the community manager outlet. Go through the official sources and stuff to get a hold of them. But,
yeah.
Ultimately, this was. That was well worth it.
Yeah, but it was right now at the end of the day, I have to admit that was well worth it. I had a blast. Thank you a lot, guys, for your time. It was.
Well, you have me on Discord now, so next time you want to do something, just send me a direct message.
Okay, sure. I will. So yeah, thank you a
I'll
lot,
send
guys.
you a friend request to Thomas. For a direct line of contact. So
yeah, just in case, chat, if I have seen a lot of your questions, of particular manner that you have been seen. It's just that some questions couldn't be asked. So sorry for that. Yeah, either because of the NDA or because for one you guys made some questions related to Lords of the Fallen 2. So it's not on Hexworks anymore, therefore these questions cannot be answered, so sorry for that. Mm-hmm. And I have seen some other questions of an annoying type, so these are the ones that also not asked at the end of the day. But anyway, outside of some outliers, chat was also fantastic. Thank you a lot to everyone for participating, having discussions in chat and so on. It was a really good time. Thank you again, and I will be wrapping up the live stream right now. So for now, I'm just I'm gonna briefly mute myself, guys. Just gonna say bye to the fan base, and eventually gonna come back to you and gonna say goodbye again. But yet again,
Sounds
Thomas,
good.
Saul, Frosty, thank you all for the talk, for the podcast, and
My pleasure,
yeah.
man.
I'm
Thanks
gonna
to you guys. It was
gonna
a
mute
pleasure.
myself for a moment. Yeah.
Thanks for having us.